Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brélade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre. Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Gruville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen. Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député Labby.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Luce. Madame le député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député de Hegera. Monsieur le député Ayer. Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves.
Présente.
Madame le député Gardner. Monsieur le député Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham. Madame le député Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Mezek. Monsieur le député Balash. Monsieur le député Coles. Madame le député Poré.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Wall.
Présent.
Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott. Monsieur le député Reniff.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet.
Présente.
Madame le député Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le député Miller. Madame le député Howe.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet. Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac. Monsieur le député Curtis. Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Monsieur le greffier.
Prions Dieu. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui le composent et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toutes leurs délibérations étant accompagnées de ta bénédiction réussissent au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui t'a plu de commettre le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné et invoqué en disant « Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal, car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre. Vous jurez que Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham. Monsieur le député Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Balash.
Défait.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Madame le député Miller.
So Deputy Miller is out of the island on state's business. Thank you.
State's business.
Madame le député Kovac.
Defo.
Monsieur le Deputy Curtis.
Les États sont constitués. So we resume the debate on P34, which is the Lobbying Guidance and Engagement Code for elected members. And Deputy Ayer, you'd indicated a wish to speak.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Having read the lobbying guidance, I would urge members not to support this proposal being brought by the Machinery Governance Subcommittee, because as it stands, it will create a new level of unnecessary bureaucracy on future members of this Assembly and may well deter people from putting their names forward to stand for election in the future. The definition of lobbying in the proposal is described as a person representing an organisation, body or group with a shared purpose who seeks to influence a state's member to support a particular outcome. In my eyes, that means pretty much any engagement that a member has, which happens on a regular basis. These interactions will have to be recorded. I say have to, of course, but this will be voluntary. So what is the purpose of it? The code states that lobbying includes any person representing community groups, charity groups and business groups as lobbyists, which I have to question, and which I believe many of those said groups would contend. The code seems to imply that it is a questionable practice to make representations to elected representatives, which then has to be documented and held for public scrutiny. Surely this will only deter those who had good cause to approach states members. As an example, I attended the charity sector event at the Trinity Showground on the 16th of March, as did many other members and prospective candidates. If this proposal is passed today, each and every interaction at that event would have to be declared on the lobbying register. I'm sure that members will accept that this would be quite ludicrous. The register will inevitably turn into a massive document, certainly much larger and more detailed than the example given, leading to the most assiduous members making hundreds of entries, and of course, others making no declaration at all. It is accepted that all sorts of people engage with members of the Assembly, but this does not make them a lobbyist. The term lobbyist is normally used to refer to paid advocates retained by organisations rather than to individuals or organisations making representations on their own behalf. To describe residents around People's Park, as in the appendix, as a lobbying group is not a good example. The code suggests that the only exemption is a person representing individual views. Why make the distinction? If an individual contacts a member on a private matter, but is also the chair of a charity, how are they classified? The code requires members to record engagements they had with the lobbyist on the members' lobbying register. If this is implemented, members will need to update it daily, or if they are ministers, then their secretaries will be given the extra workload. For example, if a charity invites all members of the Assembly to the presentation on their views of what should be done in a particular area, then every member who attends will have to declare that. So if Age Concern writes to each member supporting an increase in the pension, 49 members will have to declare this. I do not believe that this is a requirement in the UK. Is there really a problem in Jersey that needs to be addressed? And does it necessitate such draconian measures, way beyond what applies in other jurisdictions? I informed the chair of the subcommittee that I would not be supporting his proposition, and I ask all members to reject it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy.
So may I raise the defo on Deputy Kovac?
Members content to raise the defo? The defo is raised. Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Stevens.
Thank you, sir. When I was younger, I used to laugh when my mum would go to tell me off, and she would say, "I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed." And it often landed harsher there. And I have to say, sir, I'm disappointed at the chair of PPC's comments there. Not necessarily just because he's urging members not to support it, but because I think he's missed the point on what is trying to be raised here. And it may be, as the person who brought this proposition said to us, it's not perfect, but it would have been nice to at least see some acknowledgement of some of the issues that this group have tried to work together to bring out today. So I do support this proposition, and I do thank the subcommittee for their hard work on it, because I think there are some very legitimate reasons behind it and things that I think were really worth exploring, and I'm glad that it's come to the Assembly today so that we can talk about it and raise some awareness. I agree with Deputy Coles that it isn't perfect, and with Deputy Rob Ward, who said yesterday that there may be a lot more that could be done as well. But to me, sir, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything, or it doesn't stop me certainly from voting against this. And I'd like to give two examples in my own work where I think it's quite relevant. And the first is that since I was elected, I committed to try and post regular updates on my social media, because that was the easiest way for me to get it out, but about the work that I'd been doing in that week or every couple of weeks. And one of the main drivers for that was because I wanted to be very open and transparent about the groups I was meeting and talking to. And of course, I use my judgment on that, and it's not every individual I've spoken to, but it's where there are larger groups or shared interests or matters of particular public importance. So for me, that's how I've tried to start addressing this in my own way, because I think it is something, particularly in a small community like Jersey, that is even more important. Now, we sometimes hear people say that in a small community, everybody knows everybody, so it's impossible to do something like this. Actually, I have the opposite view. It's even more important that we're all aware of how lobbying works, how it works at all ends of the spectrum. I think there's sometimes a feeling among members of our community who perhaps aren't part of larger groups or don't have paid individuals representing their interests, that it's those who shout the loudest who get things done, or who get their interests heard more. And I think for individual members of the public, that can be very frustrating at times, and they don't always know how to access the system, navigate systems, and they really have to go out of their way to work that out and ask for help with it. That's not always an easy thing to do. People have busy lives, and it takes an awful lot of time and effort and commitment, and often a really tough skin to be able to do that, particularly as an individual. So I think there are lots of issues there that in a small community it's important we don't lose sight of those, in my view. The other example I wanted to give is that while I was an assistant minister, I had the pleasure of being subject to an FOI, and the FOI was can we have the details of all the sports clubs and organisations that Deputy Stevenson has met with since she's been in post? Well, with pleasure, and it was a very long list. But when we have reports coming back about our FOI system and the strains that puts on workload and costs and others, that didn't need to be an FOI. That individual could have emailed me if they'd wanted to, and I would have happily told them. But also, I would have put that on my lobbying register as well. In fact, it was probably throughout those catch-ups that I'd put online as well. So there is interest in knowing who States members are meeting from the public out there. They would like some more transparency. I think there's also very legitimate reasons why we could do a much better job of explaining how we work, how we engage with lobbyists and individuals, how people can access us and those environments to make their views heard as well. So I will be supporting this today, but at the very least I do hope that it's started a bit of a conversation, that it does raise some awareness among members and the wider public as well. And I would encourage members to think about their own interactions and just how they might make small steps to be as transparent as possible, because in a small community I think it's more important than ever. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Stevenson. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I sympathise very much regarding the desire for transparency that the lobby and guidance seeks. I was a member of the subcommittee when it was initiated, however, and I did have some difficulty with it, and I continued having difficulty with it. I resigned before it was completed. And the difficulty I had was that whilst I could see what it was trying to do, and it was developed in the light, in the wake of a proposition brought by Deputy Moore to make ministers' diaries more transparent, it became clear to me that what was really happening was that the committee itself was tying itself in knots in terms of trying to take this issue forward, because it is quite a complex one. And I believe that the chair of the PPC has mentioned some of the issues. That there's data protection issues, there's confidentiality issues. It's how you distinguish individuals from what I believe the lobbying guidance is itself trying to deal with organised groups, so like trade unions and other groups, and I very much got the impression that it was a reaction to lobbying in the context of a specific law, which was the residential tenancy law, and indeed in connection with comments made about a particular organisation there. And as the guidance progressed, I found myself uncomfortable because there did seem to be a bit of a narrative that sounded almost anti-business, and that's gone out. But I do feel that there remains some issues, and again, the chair of the PPC has mentioned one, which is it's almost like a red tape issue. So if all members are actually contacted by a lobbyist, we all would be putting information on this register, and that creates more administration. And where does it really get us? More lately, I've been wondering whether the real issue, and this is picking up from Deputy Stevenson's point, is to have more transparent and consistent processes in policy making. I myself haven't always seen this, but it was something that I became more conscious of when I was working on the Ombudsman report, because the policymakers in government do need to tread this path between keeping information private, not being too emotive, and so they generally will have these public consultations, which will enable views and different positions to be expressed. And I note that that's what scrutiny will do too. And that may be the best way forward in terms of dealing with the whole issue and concern about how people get influenced, or states members are influenced and policy gets influenced. So in the meantime, and what's really important is that is consistent. I'm afraid that I have come across instances where decisions perhaps are made by ministers, and I would say that there's a lack of transparency. There still could be a concern that perhaps lobbyists have influenced them and there's been no public consultation. I've actually raised that myself as a scrutiny chair in the context of one particular decision. So my inclination is not to support the guidance. I feel that there are still these issues that aren't resolved. It was a useful discussion and conversation, but I remain uncomfortable with having it implemented.
Thank you, Deputy Scott. Does anyone member wish to speak? Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank Deputy Stevenson actually for her speech. She actually made many of the points that I wanted to make really very eloquently. So I won't repeat those points. But as a member of the subcommittee, I did want to stand up and talk about where this is coming from, and also to say to Deputy Ward that I actually agree with the points that he was making yesterday, and what he described as where we need to get to is where I genuinely believe where we need to get to. And that's indeed where we started within the committee. But it soon became apparent that that was seen as a step too far for our jurisdiction. So we needed to start somewhere. Very often, actually, Deputy Ward says to me, don't stop yourself from achieving things by the pursuit of perfection. So I think that's where I've come to a different conclusion than he did in relation to this particular, the art of perfection, in this particular proposition. Lobbying does exist in the island, and I think, again, to paraphrase Deputy Stevenson, I have been disappointed by some of the conversations that have arisen in relation to this proposition. Almost a view that lobbying doesn't happen in Jersey. Why would we be concerned about it? You know, that's something that happens in bigger jurisdictions, and bigger jurisdictions need to deal with it, but not us. But we do need to be cognizant, and it's really important as we come towards a new assembly with new members being inducted as well, and hopefully anybody that is returned to this assembly will refresh their inductions, that elected members take the time to consider the effect of lobbyists and lobbying groups and how that may affect the decisions made by ministers, the decisions made by scrutiny panels, and the decisions made by us all here in this chamber. And that's why we came, I think, to the place that we came to as a subcommittee, because what I feel the guidelines do is give the opportunity for members to reflect. I think that the voluntary guidance on noting which lobbying groups or lobbyists you have met with also gives individual members the opportunity to reflect, but also the public to know if meetings have been balanced or not. For example, as Social Security Minister, who has to consider employment legislation and minimum wage. If I was meeting with business representatives who lobby, such as the Chamber of Commerce, the Institute of Directors, or the Hospitality Association, but not the trade unions, that would be unbalanced. All of those organisations lobby. All of those organisations take membership fees from their members, and they talk on behalf of their members. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that it is dangerous when that type of interaction happens behind closed doors. It's an interesting week for me to have this debate, because we actually have seen firsthand this week what happens as a result of lobbying. We've seen a proposition brought by a member. In my view, that was as the result of lobbying by a lobbying organisation. Perhaps if the meetings held with that organisation were made public, then the other organisation that had a different view may well have had a conversation with that member, and we may have avoided what was a very upsetting debate for many islanders. So I think it is really important for us to be cognizant of those conversations that we have. Who is trying to influence us, the purpose of that influence as well. I don't think that any member needs to be worried or afraid about the amount of work. We all keep a diary. It's not a problem to be able to, I'm sure people fill out spreadsheets to keep their budgets and things in order. As long as you do it, as things occur, it doesn't become a big job. So it is one of those things that people would just need to keep on top of if they wanted to show that transparency to the public around the meetings that they have. But it's not unusual. It's not unusual in larger jurisdictions. And it's also not unusual in the smaller parts of those larger jurisdictions. So, for example, on a local government level in larger countries, it may well be implemented that people would be open and transparent about their meeting with lobbyists and lobbying groups. Back to Deputy Ward, because I know that as well, part of where we would want to get to is that we do have an official register of lobbyists that people can sign up to. Very often there are people that have Facebook groups, Facebook pages, who will then write to ministers, write to members saying that they're representative. It would be useful for us to know what the constitution of those organisations is and exactly how many people they are representing. I think that that would be really useful for us. And I reiterate that where Deputy Ward talked about yesterday is exactly where I want to get to. But I think that at the moment, where we got to as a committee is the right place for now and the first step in that very clear need for openness and transparency on this island. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Feltham. Deputy Jeune.
Thank you, sir. And I rise as a member of the panel, and I completely support what Deputy Feltham has described as the history of this proposition. And it was a shame to hear the chair of PPC as asking members not to support this, because at the beginning we did go to PPC hoping for more of a mandatory register, and we came from that direction of wanting a mandatory register for lobbyists rather than where we've ended up. And I hope this is a first discussion that we can carry on, because I think it's really important debate to have and to bring it into the Assembly floor and actually talk about our experiences of being lobbied, and how it is difficult that we as individual members have to weigh up the information that we get. And I think we've also seen it the last few days, for myself, for example, around PFAS. We're getting information from both sides, from very passionate campaigners around really wanting to see a standard, and I think it was absolutely legitimate, and they've been very passionate and vocal about that. But at the same time, we've been seeing the ones who have to implement the standard at the end of it, and the concerns that they have with that. And as members, we have to weigh up those both sides and sometimes have to make really incredible, difficult decisions. But we have to recognise the information that we're being received, and who is giving us that information, and what we will take from that, and the analysis from that, and therefore make a decision accordingly. And I think that is the fundamental reason why we're bringing this to the Assembly, to have this conversation. So we need to recognise, even if people come to us in the capacity, as they're saying, individuals, and start talking about their experiences, for example, as a landlord, it's absolutely legitimate. But when their concerns are raised that seem very consistent with messages that continue with different landlords, you realise that there is a message being put there that may not necessarily be their own experience, but actually they have been encouraged and persuaded to come from a wider group. That is fine. Again, that is fine. But we as individuals have to recognise that. And why I'm saying this is because I believe, because before entering Jersey politics, and as you all know, I spent over a decade in Brussels working to influence policy and legislation. I've been a registered lobbyist. I know what it is like. I followed the lobby transparency law in the EU, so I had to be registered as a lobbyist, and my name was on the lobbyist register, and that meant that every time I met, whether it was a member of the European Parliament or a commissioner or an official, they registered that I was meeting them, and I registered that I was meeting them, so we were doing it both. And I want to just to point out, before I carry on with this, from the chair of PPC, is that you don't have to be paid to be a lobbyist. I think that's really important, because maybe many, especially charities, don't have the money to pay for a specific lobbyist, like one particular. You have many jobs. I wasn't just lobbying, that wasn't just me because I was working for charities. That wasn't just my role. I had a huge amount. I was a policy developer. I developed policy. I had to run huge teams across in many different countries around the world. So maybe, for example, as a CEO specifically, potentially, you may have within your job description a 5% of influencing policy. And it may not say that, but it says your discussions with government. You need to interact with government. That is part of it, whether we're in Jersey or whether it's the EU or whether it is in more international organisation. Many organisations have that in their job descriptions to have that. And why not? It's really important because you as a charity or you as an organisation and as a business are going to go and explain how the impact of the decisions that are being made are going to have on the people that you're representing or the businesses that you're representing. It is part of what it is. But what is important is the transparency that around that, so that everybody understands, and we can see that within the UK government and the UK Parliament, that there are many politicians in the UK Parliament who are also being employed by lobby firms to lobby themselves, to give access to ministers, to give access to other decision makers, because maybe they're not the big decision makers as maybe, say, ministers. They are even paid to be able to give that access, to bring them into Parliament, just to be able to bump into people in the corridors or in the bar or in the area. So it's really important to understand that we don't have that here, yes, in that sense, because we can bump into people in King Street. We don't have to bring people into the States Assembly or into the corridors of the States Assembly. But it's very important that we understand that it happens at whatever scale. But I also want to say it's really important because it's to understand those who are in decisions, and it's not just maybe at this here in the Assembly, but of course we understand there's concentric rings of power in this Assembly, and some people make bigger decisions than others. It's reality here. For example, the top level is ministers, for example. And that's really important to understand who they're meeting with. Because as I said, I was a registered lobbyist, but it's not a dirty word. I was working for civil society. And what we had to do to get any access, especially to commissioners, is that to represent with one voice, we had to, even though maybe our membership was spanning the 28 member states. We had thousands of organisations within each of those member states. We had to agree to one single position to be able to secure a meeting with a commissioner, with a minister equivalent. We had to come together and we had to work extremely hard to come to one position. And I recall trying to engage with a trade commissioner. Unfortunately, it was someone who's been in the news recently, on the impact of EU trade agreements on smallholder farmers and businesses in developing countries. I've also had to try to talk with the Internal Market Commissioner on social enterprises facing challenges, and all of those I had to bring into one position to be able to have broad representation and strong evidence, because that's what they were demanding. Yet, because of the lobby register, I could see that at the same time when the Trade Commissioner and the Internal Market Commissioner was meeting me, that they were meeting individual businesses on a regular basis, where I may have meeting once every 6 months. Individual businesses were meeting them 3 times a week, 4 times a week. It's being very clear that you can see that there is the imbalance that businesses and organisations and others and well-resourced businesses and individual industries have much more access. And I think that's really important to raise because, again, this isn't Brussels, Jersey is not Brussels, but there is that mirror. It still is happening here. I don't know if everyone watched House of Cards back in the day when they were discussing about updating the food standards and updating the diet guidance to tell the American people what to eat to help with the balanced diet. And spinach farmers went and lobbied substantially to make sure that spinach became part of a bigger part of that diet balance. And I remember Kevin Spacey, taking on that and absolutely going for it because he was given some good perks because of that. But it shows that we're not talking about necessary paid lobbyists. We're talking about that there are big influences that can happen and may not necessarily be based on scientific evidence. So the principle, as I'm trying to say, is exactly the same. Whether we're in Brussels, whether we're in the UK Parliament, or whether we're here in Jersey, it is about influence, because it is not just about what is said, it is about who gets into the room, how often, and on what terms. And in a small jurisdiction like ours, where relationships are closer and access can be more informal, that principle arguably makes matters even more. Because without transparency, there is always a risk, whether real or perceived, that some voices are heard more often than others. And this is not about wrongdoing, it's about human nature and access. And that is why transparency is so important. So members need to recognise that they're being lobbied. They need to recognise, weigh up what's being told of them and make that analysis. And I hope that members, though maybe this at the moment is not the time to bring in a register, even though I will be supporting this, I think it's an important discussion to have, and I hope that it is brought back into the next assembly where we can talk about, again, how we can ensure that when we're making decisions, that we weigh it up with the different sides and obviously bring scientific evidence into that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Sharon. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. So I do have a lot of sympathy for the sub-panel, sir, not necessarily for what they produce, but for the sub-panel, because I think I've been in a situation, having served on PBC from the inception of, well, from when I was around, rather, in 2008, and I got to know very quickly how PBC works, and I learned very quickly, don't join any PBC sub-panels, because I think often they seem to me to be set up to fail, and it's often where we put the too difficult to do work. And I know that from the machinery of government reviews that sub-panels have done in the past, is that you're not going to get anywhere with them. That's my experience. Maybe it's a bit cynical, so a bit, not cynical, but a bit pessimistic, rather. But good luck to the members. And I don't mean this in any bad way, but if I'm not mistaken, are all of the sub-panel, were they all composed of first-time members? Because I think they could have perhaps, I'm not sure why other members hadn't put themselves forward. If that's not the case, I'm happy to be corrected. Because I think there's a problem which is maybe trying to be solved here, but I'm not sure, first of all, if we've identified what the problem is correctly, let alone whether the solution is correct. Sir, I was in here last week, I think Deputy Miles was, this week with Lemoy School. I was in for the morning session. I believe she was here in the afternoon for them. I thought they did very well in their debate, and I was lucky enough to go in the preceding week to give them maybe some pointers and some tips about things they might want to consider. And I think they had a very nuanced debate, in fact. That they came up with some arguments that often schools don't at that age. We're talking about year 5s here, so they're 9 and 10-year-olds. And they were making some quite nuanced arguments. And I'm pleased, because when I went in to speak to them, I said, look, you might actually be all agreeing on the ultimate aim. I think in this case, we all want to see transparency, and we all value that. And we don't want to see lobbyists having undue influence. But I did say to them, when you're looking at a proposition, look at who are the winners and losers, look at the unintended consequences of what it is that you're debating and the way you vote, and also ask yourselves, is there another way to achieve the same outcome? And when I look at this, I think, first of all, we don't have a register of lobbyists yet. I think it's going to be highly problematic to establish what that is, and then to say to members in this assembly that you can if you want to, but you don't have to record any engagement that you've had with these lobbyists who haven't yet been defined. I think it's going to be fraught with problems. I think it's fraught with problems on a practical level, because I think it's going to tie members who are already very busy up in knots, because members are going to be, I think, getting very concerned about doing the right thing, saying, I'm not sure whether I've just been lobbied by somebody, I've just had a phone call, And I don't know whether this person who's a landlord or who's called me about play parks in St. Brelard, I don't know if she's a member of a lobby group. And actually, it might only be when you've got the fourth phone call saying more or less the same thing. Is that because they've just been watching the news? Is that because they're part of a group? Do you then start to ask? And I think there's a missing step here. I think the first thing that we need to have, which I don't think we've had up until now, is better training for States members when they come in, and continuous training to actually flag up to us what our responsibilities are, what the expectations are, and actually what good practice looks like. And I think that needs to start with government, if I'm honest, because I think government are the ones who are most susceptible to lobbying. And I think they're also the ones who tend to have the secretarial support. You know, I think to require a backbencher who may not have, or is unlikely to have, certainly doesn't have their own PA, they don't have any secretarial staff apart from the very good support that the GREF staff give, but that's in a different format, and it's generic, and it's to be shared by everyone. I think we're potentially setting ourselves up to fail here. We often talk about red tape for the business community. What about creating unnecessary red tape for politicians? Because I think that this is a form of red tape which actually doesn't achieve what it's setting out to do. So I think that there are ways to achieve what we want, which is that training. And also, that training would involve really simple common sense things like saying when people contact you, get an audit trail. So if you're going to enter into any meaningful dialogue apart from the initial conversations that you have, and it is a difficult scenario because we're all being contacted by a multitude of different media now. You will get a message come through to you on Messenger. You'll get a message come through to you on WhatsApp. You'll get a message come through as a text message. I have to be very vigilant that I don't miss text messages because I don't get the notification. So I sometimes only see text messages maybe a day or two later, whereas WhatsApp I might get. You get emails, and if you're on your way out of the door to a meeting, you know that somebody's just messaged you. You half see it, and you don't know exactly which format they've messaged you on, and then you have trouble finding that email. And it's really difficult if you don't have the secretarial support. So this isn't like a feel sorry for States members kind of speech, but it is to acknowledge the very specific context in which we all work. And add on to that, if you're a minister or a constable and you're obviously dealing with queries and potential complaints or concerns from a parish or ministerial point of view, then you can see it gets very difficult very quickly. I did want to quip, of course, that, you know, do we need a register for lobbyists when actually you could argue that there are already some very strong lobbyists in this assembly for different industries, and those who are perhaps tongue-in-cheek might say that Deputy Gorst and possibly Deputy Miller, his running mate in the senatorial elections. I look forward to seeing their posters, by the way. I think they're going to be very similar. And good luck to them. They will be seen as lobbyists for the finance industry. I sometimes joke with those close to me that Deputy Gorst isn't just a politician, he's actually the UK ambassador to Jersey. And he does a very good job looking after the financial interests, I think, probably of the whole community. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, because I think he's quite open. Some might joke that Deputy Morell is a lobbyist for the economic development of the island. That's his role as a minister. Is he a lobbyist for the hospitality industry, for the tourist industry? He may be, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. They probably would like that. So the charges can be brought. What's important is that actually there needs to be transparency in that lobbying, and I think the point I would make here is that there's a facility which I've raised, I think usually in the background on PPC, that there's a facility for the public to email all States members. And I think there's a fine line between contacting your constituency representatives, which I've always encouraged us and the GREF to say, this is where we should be pushing constituents. So wherever you live in the island, and it will change perhaps slightly when the senators come back, is that your first point of call if you have a query, especially if it's a political point that you want to make about a debate that's coming up, don't email all States members because there's 49 of them and they're unlikely to get back to you all. But if you send an email that's addressed to a certain person, with their names on it, they're much more likely to get back to you, and there's that relationship there. That's the point. You elect a constable or you elect your deputies, and their immediate responsibility is to you, and they're much more likely to engage with you meaningfully. And I think possibly if we keep the facility saying that you're going to email all states members, there should be a caveat on there, a little asterisk, which says, by the way, in emailing all states members, this will be published on the website because you will be considered a lobbyist. And if you're happy for this email to be published on the website, then that's great. Same as when you send a circular email ahead of a debate, we would like you to vote in a certain way because of this. All of those could be uploaded onto a website. Otherwise, you email your own constituency representatives, and there's a strong presumption, of course, almost a sacrosanct, I think, that that is confidential and it remains between you and the representative. And I think, you know, even lobbyists have a right to contact their state's member and expect confidentiality in the same way that you would with perhaps a doctor, sir. So I think it's much more sophisticated than just producing an as of yet list of would-be lobbyists that members can or don't have to lobby and register on that list if they feel that it's the right thing. So I think we're just going to cripple and tie future states members up in knots for very little to show for it. Actually, there's probably a much better way of doing this. So this isn't a case of saying this isn't a perfect plan. I think it's actually saying that this is no way near what needs to be done, and that actually it's probably for the full PPC after the elections to get their heads around what the problem is, if there is one at all, and how we should deal with it. But certainly for my part, that should involve greater training. We should be calling on our membership of the CPA and probably the APF to say, what is it that you do in your parliaments that works, and obviously make sure it's appropriate for a smaller jurisdiction and parliament like ourselves, and then take it from there. But I think it is incumbent, of course, on every member and every future member to make sure that they declare their interests and that they're as open as possible, sir.
Well, the next member I had to speak was Deputy Morrell.
Could I raise the defo on Deputy Balash, or unless it's been done already?
It hasn't been done.
Thank you.
Members content to raise the defo? Defo is raised. So, Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. It's been one of my observations over the past 8 years in the States Assembly that in life there are people who believe that every human interaction can be boiled down to a process. And that's what this particular document before us and this proposition and the documents that follow it feels like they are trying to do. Those people, I always feel, are sadly mistaken. Human interaction cannot be boiled down to a process. Process is one of the things that is slowing this island up. It is one of the things that is making it increasingly difficult to be a politician in this island and to lead this island, because we are wrapping ourselves up in knots and we are wrapping ourselves up in processes that achieve nothing. And the proposition before us achieves, quite simply, nothing except increased bureaucracy. I can guarantee now a lack of transparency. The thing that took my breath away when I was reading the proposition and the documents was that they seem to completely ignore the fact that we are in Jersey, that we have interactions every day as we walk down the street with people, that we have, I can be quite simply standing outside this assembly and I will have people from different businesses or different community groups or different parishes stop and talk to me. And what I read in these documents is something that I am meant to try to boil down every single one of those interactions into a type of interaction and need to comment on it. Now, for the last 4 years, I've had the real honour and privilege of serving as Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. I have clearly stated many times about interactions with various groups, the Jersey Hospitality Association, the Chamber of Commerce, as just two that come to mind, many more, the Jersey Farmers Union, many more. I am open about that constantly because to me it makes sense that as Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, I would engage with trade representative groups and businesses themselves. I walk into shops in town to see how business is going. That's, to me, part of the job that I should be doing, and to be honest, all members of this assembly should be doing. I do not expect to then have to write that down, that I had an informal conversation with somebody. And I know this is voluntary, the proposal is voluntary, but the proposal, by being voluntary, undermines itself even further. I do understand, and I do fear in Jersey, that there is an issue around external lobby groups in the island. I think there are some particular issues, especially around moral issues and things like this, where non-Jersey organisations have a significant influence. And it has been put to me in the past that the Crown dependencies, as small self-governing jurisdictions, can be targeted by lobby groups from outside the island, who then want to say, oh, look, Jersey's done something. Look, UK, you need to do it too. Now, that is something that is far more easily reported on and would be much more easy for me and for every other states member to say, yes, this organisation from outside the island has contacted me and would like a meeting to discuss X or Y. That, to me, would be a more appropriate place for us to be reporting on our interactions with lobbyists. But the idea that we do that in Jersey for every group, every business, every organisation that we come in contact with in the course of our day, that is people trying to seek to create a process that does not fit this island. It might fit Brussels, it might fit London, it might fit Paris, it does not fit Jersey. And I think it was astounding to read the proposition because it felt like it was something that wasn't written by people who operate in Jersey. And I don't understand that. Jersey needs to move away from this concept that every process that goes on elsewhere is a process that's appropriate for Jersey. Human interaction cannot be boiled down to processes. Human interaction is something quite magical, to be honest with you. But it's something that goes on in this island every day and keeps this community alive. And I will know that, any member of this assembly I know will be talking to any group of people within Jersey, and that's their right. That's exactly, we are known. One of the things that makes this job wonderful and difficult at the same time is that we are so accessible. That accessibility in itself is impossible to bring down to a process. And I reject any attempt to do so, because it's essentially the people trying to say, yes, Jersey is just an individual set of processes that we can control and that we can manage. And it's not, it's far more than that. It's far better than that, and it's far greater than that. And so I'm very pleased, I was delighted. It was a morning treat to hear the chair of PPC's speech this morning. Because I finally felt like, oh, okay, there are people that are actually reading this for what it is. And this proposition needs to be rejected, wholeheartedly rejected. By all means, any subcommittee, bring back a proposition around external lobbying groups, from outside the island. I think that would be a valid and reasonable thing to do. But as far as trying to capture every interaction of every state's member with every organisation in Jersey, no, sir. That's the essence of our job. You don't try to capture that and put it on paper. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Morel. The next member I have to speak is Deputy Moore, followed by Deputy Luce, followed by the Connétable of St Clement. So, Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I am saddened by the tone of some of the speeches, which seem to be playing the usual game of kicking something into the long grass. There have been some really excellent speeches, and I won't go over again the points made by Deputies Jern, Feltham and Stevenson. But, sir, what we have to keep focused on here is that this is a compromise proposal coming from a sub-panel that was asked to consider this after the proposition I brought about registering ministerial diaries was kicked out about 18 months ago. It was a great shame that that was rejected by this assembly. It was, in my view, a much simpler thing to achieve than what is before us now. I do accept that it is somewhat complicated. But as I said, what was put before members 18 months ago was a simpler version. This is a voluntary scheme. It is a step in the right direction. It is really surprising and concerning that the chair of PPC, in calling this questionable, asked the Assembly, is there a problem? Well, if members do not recognise the problem that members of our community share with us constantly, then that I really question why they are in the Assembly purporting to represent our community. So the refrains, the old boys club, decisions made behind closed doors are constant and consistent. They have been for many, many years. And this, sir, is one small step on the road to try to calm those concerns expressed so clearly by our community, to offer a solution to members, to encourage them to recognise the importance of discussions that they have and the vested interests that they represent sometimes when taking certain decisions. We are in a crisis at the moment, a crisis of confidence. Our community lack confidence in the processes that go on here and the interests that are represented in this Assembly. It is exceptionally sad, sir, and I do hope that members will dig deep into their consciences and understand the underlying point that is being made here, which is that there should be greater openness and transparency to meet the clear concerns of our community. And with that, sir, I encourage members to vote for this proposition, which is, as I say, a compromise and a very small step to help improve public confidence in this very chamber. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Moore. Next member to speak is Deputy Luce.
I'll be quick, sir, but I just wanted to, and he's not here, unfortunately, thank Deputy Morell. I can't begin to speak as eloquently as he can off the record, but he's right about access, because my phone number's in the book, my email address is known to everybody, people know where I live. I can't believe that in other large jurisdictions, public have access to their politicians in the way they do in Jersey. And certainly they're not backward in coming forward when it comes to letting me know that. I just want to make a couple of practical observations, sir. Yesterday was a very quiet day, I think, on the emails. Certainly for me, I was busy in here. Of the 40 emails I had, I think 16 of those could be described as lobbyists. And this morning on my way into work, I had 3 conversations on the phone. All 3 were absolutely could be on a list of lobbyists, but in each of those occasions, these phone calls were to what people I would regard as leaders of industry. I made the phone call. Does that count as lobbying if I'm making the phone call? I want information from these people about certain things, and I phone them to find out the answer to my questions. The other thing I would just say before I sit down is in the definition of lobbying or lobbyists, a person representing an organisation, body or group. And group is defined as 2 or more people. A husband or wife sitting at home unhappy about a planning decision who contact me via either email or message or what have you, could be construed as a lobbying group. I could spend, and I know people will say, well, you should be prepared to do that, but I could spend half my day writing down the people who talk to me, the 2 people who stopped me on my way here this morning. I don't know where it ends. I listened to Deputy Jeune with interest, actually, because there is one group who've done an enormous amount of lobbying of states members in the last fortnight or so. So I was interested to hear her comments there. But for me at the moment, while it may come in the future, I can't support it at the moment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Luce. The Connétable of St Clement.
Thank you, sir. I'm a little bit torn between voting for or contra on this. And members might expect me to vote contra because of my experiences with the Lido situation and the lobbying group that was put together by probably 3 individuals with points to prove. In some instances, the Facebook and the emails, etc., were disgraceful. It was certainly time-consuming and costly to both our company and also particularly the States of Jersey, because the time it took and the red herrings that were set by the Lavalida lobby group. Having said that, I'm not against lobbying. I think it's a useful source of communication, and it should always be. But I do urge on the side of caution, because in some instances, particularly with the Lido and perhaps Friends of Jersey Hospital, I believe that sometimes lobbyists have too much power and bend the states to their will, because the States of Jersey sometimes is not strong enough to push back. So I'm a little bit torn. I do also need to stress that we are very, very busy people. My manifesto says that I will look after the business of the St. Clement's Parish before everything else. And I have to say, I'm pushed for time these days. We are available to all members of the community, both as St. Clement's constables or constables around the parishes, but also as States members. So we are available through the directory of States members on our telephones and by email and by Facebook and by WhatsApp. And I have calls sometimes saying, why haven't you replied to my email? I sent it 15 minutes ago. But we have to look at all the various sources of communication that come into us. And it's a lot more complicated than 30 years ago, where it was a phone call or a fax. So my biggest problem is time. I can't write down everything that's put to me by groups of lobbyists. I'm being lobbied at the moment about traffic. I'm being lobbied about scaffolding, flooding. Who in the meadow? My word, I've had 6 emails in the last 2 days. It's a valiant effort, I think, by the subcommittee, but I'm afraid there's more work to do, and we need less work to do as States members and constables. So I think on this occasion, I would have to vote against the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I would like to invoke Standing Order 84 proposal to close the debate. That is under 84.1. Because
So you're giving 30 minutes notice?
Yes.
Very well. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak?
Sir, does that not infringe the benefits of the contribution of backbenchers?
Well, we've had quite a number of backbenchers, but we have another 30 minutes to go. So, Deputy, you're free to speak. Deputy Jean, Constable of St. John.
Sir, I can assure you I've been called worse.
Yeah.
Sir, I've held 231 drop-in sessions since I've been Conotop, and I've seen 1,039 people at those sessions. So a good number have attended more than once. I have one frequent traveller who comes very regularly, and my deputy colleagues see the same people. So people often come in pairs, or occasionally I may have seen 3, 4 or 5 people at once. People come for a whole range of different reasons, often very personal, either to themselves or family members, neighbour disputes, speed in vehicles, planning, etc., etc. Clearly, sir, some come as lobbyists, and they're lobbying for certain causes. We've heard already this morning about landlords who have been mentioned. Well, sir, I've seen individuals who are landlords coming to talk to me about their genuine concerns. I've also seen officials from the JLA. All have been very welcome. Sir, I think it's fairly easy to identify when somebody is representing a group or representing themselves. If you look at this week's meeting's agenda, sir, it is clear that we have all been lobbied on a good number of those items. So later this week, we're going to be talking about illegal lifts. I've been responsible for the taxi industry for just over 2 years, sir. I meet with them quarterly. Those meetings are minuted, sir. But I can assure you, illegal lifts has been mentioned at every one of those meetings. So I do think that we need training. It's essential. So one member's bureaucracy that we've just heard will be described by this member as accountability. And I believe, sir, every journey starts with a single step, and I'm happy to support the sub-panel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Gorst.
I was minded to speak in response to Deputy Jeune, because I thought as she started her speech telling us about the way Brussels deals with lobbying, she was going to be against the sub-panel's proposal, but she wasn't. And I think the reason that's important is because it follows on from what the CONITAB has just said, that if we start to go down this route, there will be resource implications. Like the Deputy, I've lobbied the Commission and parliamentarians in Brussels. Obviously, my lobbying is on behalf of Jersey Islanders and Jersey's interest. But she knows that whilst they have this process in place, it requires people to fulfil the process. The number of people that one encounters in order to get in the building, get up to the Commissioner's office, is quite considerable. And the cost implications of maintaining a diary, having a diary secretary, an argument could be made that that might be appropriate for ministers in the Jersey government, but I don't think an argument can be made that it would be appropriate for non-ministers, and yet that's not what we're asking for here. So there really is a trade-off, as Deputy Morel said, about how we do business in Jersey, which is something I think we should cherish, and creating a bureaucracy. Because even though the sub-panel have rightly said it should be voluntary and informal, we all know what will happen through a voluntary and informal system. It will be looked at. Members will, by very nature, have forgotten somebody that they spoke to in the shop. They will have been seen. There will be an accusation that they were lobbied, and why is it not on the form that they have completed? So it is an issue which I think needs to be addressed, but I think it must be addressed in a much narrower way. And the focus must be on ministers and not on all backbenchers for the reasons that I've just said. So I can't support the proposal as it currently stands, and I fear, as Deputy Tadier said, it's another case of a PPC subcommittee being almost given an impossible job to try and start to deliver something from where we are now. And I don't think that this really is the answer, but there is, of course, value in considering it further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Constable Simbrello.
Thank you, sir. I'm inclined to agree with the previous speaker, and whilst I am supportive of the concept of complete transparency in all our dealings, and that was pointed out to me some years ago when I found myself subject to a judicial review, and the lawyer advising at the time said everything needs to be minuted, and he was absolutely right. And there is a tendency to casually discuss all sorts of things, but I think sometimes so we have to sharpen up our act. But there will be consequences, and those, as Deputy Gorst said, will have costs. So I think a little bit more work needs to be done, and I would urge the future PPC to consider how they might do it and progress it in the next government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and I call upon Deputy Coles to reply.
Thank you, sir, and I'm glad that Standing Order 84 is getting good exercise in this sitting and it is accelerating us on. So thank you very much for everybody who's initiating that one. It is interesting because obviously this came as a sub-panel proposition, and so it is interesting to be proposing something that's not quite as emotionally invested in that you are when you bring something of your own. But that's the interesting and the fun part of our assembly, which I'll go back to Deputy Gorst's point, in that, yes, absolutely, it's probably a lot easier. Ministers are probably subjected to more detailed lobbying than most backbenchers. However, this assembly is quite unique in the sense that we, as backbenchers, every single member in this assembly can bring their own proposition. And that can be a proposition to, I mean, even myself in this time, I'm quite proud in my first term that not only have I been bringing amendments to government plans, propositions in my own right, but also amendments to legislation brought by ministers in my own right, rather than just through panels and committees. Because that is like I said, it's a privilege that we have of this assembly that we can do. That means that every single one of us can be influenced by lobby groups. And so actually I think there is a reason why every member of this assembly should be recording and being transparent with the public about those interactions and those meetings that you have which help form your ideas that cause you to bring about your proposition. Because yes, some of us do have our ideologies and that's where we start, and sometimes we engage with groups, sometimes some of us don't engage with groups because we just think we're right and we'll push ahead, and some of us do actually like to refine it back down and take influence from other people. But as I said in my opening speech when I paraphrased Dickens, that lobbying was good to begin with, because it is. Lobbying is absolutely an essential part of our political process, because everybody has their expertise, everybody brings their values, and we are representatives of the wider Jersey community, and we're elected to represent people and their values. Always on the balance on where to go, because I know this isn't perfect, but we have to start somewhere. And if we continuously strive for perfection, we'll only continuously disappoint ourselves, because perfection is, I'm glad Deputy Ward's not in the room because he'd be making faces at me about his perfection, but we know none of us are perfect. And we will never achieve perfection, because also when you get to something that you think is perfect, you also then have the opportunity to look and to review that and actually hone it and make it better. So with this not being perfect, I actually think, and being voluntary, and probably the lowest end of bureaucratic burdening, going back to what Deputy Jean and Deputy Gore said about when you have to get through those barriers to start lobbying. Because it always reminds me of actually where the name lobbying came from. Of course, it was from the halls of Westminster, where representatives of industry would gather outside the hall in the lobby, which sits between the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and where they would engage with ministers and members of Parliament to influence their decisions. So I look at this, and I'm just thinking of some of the comments that have been made. And Deputy Luce made a very good point when he was talking about would he have to record that he knew exactly who to phone to get an answer that he was looking for. Because actually that is a really good thing about lobbying. When you know who your lobbyists are and you have a question about an industry that they are the experts in, you knew exactly who to go to. So you knew exactly who to go to, sir. And that's why, if we were able to evolve this lobbying guidance into something that Deputy Ward would like to see, then that would be great. But like I said, that wasn't the direction that we were given by PPC, the PPC chair, and why it wasn't necessarily possible to bring it in this iteration. The Constable of St John, I mean, bravo, sir. The impressiveness that he was able to record the detail of how many people he's seen and interactions he's had goes to show that actually, is this a bureaucratic nightmare for members to do? Because he has done it successfully on his own, sir. But when we talk about, and I'm sure, like I say, we all have our surgeries, we all have people who come and speak to us, and the constables probably deal with more of the personal, individual things that members of the public want help and support with. The majority of that would not need to be registered in here because it's dealing with the personal. When we have, I mean, at our St Helier South surgery, we have a couple who come to speak to us every single week, just to have someone to talk to. They don't want to impress any policy change. They want to know what's happened in the Assembly. They want to know what we're working on. They just want to engage with us. We don't have to record that because it's not trying to influence our decision making. However, individuals who go around to every single constituency surgery, sir, and try to endorse why we need better play facilities in this island, that is lobbying. It might be a single person, but there is a single intent to influence our policy-making decisions on this island, and that is lobbying. And if that is a single person with an idea, that is what they are doing. And again, sir, it is not a problem. They are welcome to come and talk to me every single surgery. I will sit there and listen, because sometimes they say something that I hadn't even considered before, and it gives me an opportunity to expand my viewpoints on things which are going on. That like I said, and there was one of my favourite interactions actually was a group of people came, one individual came, and that person said, I represent a group of concerned parents that children spending too much time on their screens. I don't have children, sir. So I don't actually understand sometimes the issues that parents face with screens and screen times and the influences that it has on their children. So I engaged with this individual, and they told me the stories of what was happening and the bullying that was happening through social media platforms and things like that, because I wasn't exposed to social media when I was at school. So this engagement through a lobbying group taught me more about some of the problems with screens and social media than I was maybe directly aware of. Obviously, we then had Deputy Curtis's report on online safety and online harms, and that opened, with her statement here, it opened another bag of worms, but I say worms, broadened my understanding of the problem and the situation. Because this is all positive lobbying. The challenge is, sir, and like I said in my opening speech, there is a positive framing for lobbying as well as the negative. And I think actually we have seen the negative framing influencing how this assembly operates, because we have seen propositions which are brought by varying people that provide varying different parameters on something that a minister was bringing, which has caused confusion and the lack of understanding or just concern, which is causing scrutiny panels to react, because it's public engagement and scrutiny panels have to respond to evidence. And when we are being lobbied by external voices, the public has the right to know. And actually, because of raised voices from other areas and other industries associated with policy direction being brought to the floor of this assembly, the public have the right to understand, and that transparency as to why that decision came to. They don't have to have the full granular detail, but just actually a representative for clean water, a representative from the water industry, or a group of concerned families may have all submitted information or contacted members which involved them that's how they made a decision or where they got to the point that they are. Again, when we talk about the granular detail of how much information we'd have to put on the register, and the chair for PPC mentioned about the charity event. Well, I consider that much like the Chamber of Commerce lunch, sir. It's a single entry. You attended this, your choice to attend it. You were invited to, but you chose to attend, and that's fine. It's a broad event. We had the Enable event at the Radisson, sir, which I attended, and I spoke to many different people around that event. I wouldn't have recorded every single one because it was a public event. So you can quite easily say, well, public event, I attended, public event, I attended, public event, I attended. Don't have to go with, well, I spoke to the person from this charity, that charity, and another charity. So I think some people are getting bogged down in too much of the what-ifs of this proposition. The idea is this is a starting point, so we can start seeing the public can start seeing how we're engaging, but as well that members can start asking questions about the people they're engaging with. It's about finding that balance and finding the way to look at this and move forward. It could be actually that this is absolutely a bureaucratic burden and nightmare that no single member fills in which case we review that, or the Machinery of Government Subcommittee in the next term can review it, watch as it goes along, and decide, actually, do you know what, this has been a waste of time, we'll just remove it. And it's fine, but at least we can say we tried. We took that first step. It could be on the contrary, sir, that actually it becomes very successful, and members fill it out regularly, find out that it's actually very easy to do, and the public are very happy. as Deputy Stevenson's mentioned about FOIs, the panel hadn't even considered it from that perspective. And actually, when somebody puts in an FOI request, who did the minister meet for this subject? Who did the minister meet on that subject? They could be directed straight to a lobbying register. There it is, there's your information. We're actually saving government time, effort and money in that space. So, sir, this is a starting point. I'm absolutely aware everybody has their own view and opinion on this. I do hope that members can support it because we need to find ways to be more transparent. And I think this is a good first step, sir. So I call for the appel.
Thank you, Deputy Coles. The appel has been called for, so I ask members to return to their seats. And if all members have had the opportunity of returning to their seats, I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have now cast their votes, then I ask the greffier to close voting. And I can report that the proposition has been defeated. 14 votes pour, 30 votes contre, and no abstentions.
Those members voting pour, the Conotab of St Martin and St John, and Deputies Southern, Doublé, Alves, Coles, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Jearn, Kovac, Wilson, Stevenson, Moore and Mezek.
Thank you. So we move on to the next item of public business, which is P35, and that is the risk-based exclusion policy for elected members of the states. It has been lodged by PPC, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to approve the risk-based exclusion policy for elected members of the states set out in Appendix 1 to the report accompanying the proposition with immediate effect.
So, Deputy I, do you wish to propose the proposition?
Thank you, sir. With this proposition, the PPC is seeking to introduce a risk-based exclusion policy for states members which would apply should a states member be charged with a serious violent or sexual offence. The policy includes a list of sexual and violent offences covered by the policy includes a list of sexual and violent offences covered by the policy, and without reading them all out, I think members will agree with me that these are all serious offences. The policy aims to safeguard states members, employees and others. In developing the policy, the exclusion of a member has been balanced against three important considerations: ensuring continued representation for constituents, fairness to the individual under investigation, and respecting members' privilege in taking part in states proceedings. If the policy is adopted, a states member who is charged with a serious, violent or sexual offence will be temporarily excluded from entering the precincts of the state's Morier House and the Hill Street office. They will also be excluded from undertaking any off-island travel funded by the state of Jersey and will stop receiving support or funding to undertake visits or activities, including constituency drop-in sessions. All other rights of the members will be maintained, including receiving their pay. Members will be able to participate remotely in any meetings of the State Assembly, panels or committees, as well as access services provided remotely by the State's Gref or State's digital services. Members will be able to lodge propositions and amendments in their own right and submit oral and written questions. Members will also be able to continue to work in their constituency and undertake constituency drop-in sessions, but will be advised to not meet privately with members of the public. The temporary exclusion applies whether the alleged offence occurred before or after the member became an elected member of the States, and when the charge was brought inside, and whether the charge was brought inside or outside the island. The temporary exclusion will normally be automatic, except when the charge is made overseas, in which case the bailiff will consider the charge with the chair of PPC and the greffier of the States. This allows for consideration of how a charge made overseas might be treated in Jersey. It is important to note that the policy only applies when a member is charged with a relevant offence, and not if they are arrested and not charged. The exclusion will end when charges have been dropped, or the member is acquitted, or the member is convicted and sentenced. Should a member be convicted of the offence, they will become disqualified and lose their seat under the State of Jersey law or the Constable's Law 2008 if they receive an immediate 3-month or more prison sentence. The adoption of this policy allows for a temporary exclusion of a member and the safeguarding of States members, States employees and others should a member be charged with a serious, violent or sexual offence. Sir, I make the proposition and ask members to support the adoption of the risk-based exclusion policy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Is the proposition seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the
Sir,
proposition?
can I ask a question, please? I don't know if it's of yourself or the Attorney General. It says the risk-based exclusion policy charged with a serious, violent or sexual offence, as well as conduct expected of the affected member.
Where are you reading from?
I'm reading from the first page of the
policy.
second page of the proposition. So the top of the page 2 of the okay, the first paragraph of the report is probably the easiest way for me to describe it. It's just the phrase "as well as a conduct expected of the affected member," and I'm just trying to work out how that links with the previous statement, which I thought it might be the Attorney General, because I would imagine, sir, that there is a definition of a serious, violent or sexual offence, and charging meets a certain criteria in order to charge, but it's just the next bit.
Well, there is a definition in Schedule 1 which lists out the offences concerned, but I read, as well as the conduct expected of the affected member, I read that as how the affected member, which is the member who is charged with a serious, violent or sexual offence, is expected to conduct themselves in those circumstances.
Thank you, sir. I was just being clear that that's the case.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Ferry.
Yes, thank you, sir. So when I was involved in discussions on this item at PPC, I think my first concern was, where does the presumption of innocence lie in all this? And of course, you know, we are public figures, and this would obviously very quickly get into the public domain. So my first concerns were, what are the safeguards that we have around making sure that people get a fair trial? And I think as we went through the discussions, and firstly, this policy would only be invoked if there was firstly a charge preferred on the individual, and secondly, that it was only in relation to certain really serious offences. And the overarching objective of this policy, of course, is to protect other individuals that this person may come into contact with, not just fellow members, but members of staff who are within the precincts of this building. It still largely allows the individual to undertake work and to put forward propositions, as the Chair has explained, but obviously make sure that where other members are in constituency surgeries or such like, that those exclusions would also apply. So I think it's a balancing act in all of these things. I think what it highlights is there is very little in the armoury that we have at the moment. If someone is charged with a serious offence, that we can actually do. So this policy would be used, hopefully it will never be used, but we don't know the weaknesses in our system until something like that would happen, and then we would discover that there was very little that we could do. So as we went through the discussions, I became more comfortable with the fact that we weren't impinging on anyone's right to a fair trial. On that basis, I will be supporting the proposition.
Thank you, Deputy Ferry. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I just have a couple of questions for the chair of PPC. During the discussions about bringing forward this risk-based exclusion policy, were there any discussions about including other offences? At the moment, these offences are just for serious violent and serious sexual offences, although I do note that common assault is included. Was there any consideration at all about adding any offence where there is a victim? I'm thinking specifically about exploitation or perhaps fraud. That is my question. I'd like to know why and if those discussions took place. And the second question that I have involves page 3 of the appendix, when it says duration of risk-based exclusion. Once a decision has been made to exclude a member, that exclusion will be enforced from the date and the letter of exclusion provided to the member until A, charges have been dropped, B, the member is acquitted, or C, the member is convicted and sentenced. In view of the discussion that we're going to have in an upcoming debate around the criminal procedure law, although it is unlikely, what would happen if the member is subject to a hung jury? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. The next speaker is Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I thank Deputy Ferry for addressing one concern I had, or at least one understanding I wanted to explore, which is this the extent to which this might kind of go contrary to a principle of presuming people innocent until they're proved guilty, whilst needing to balance safeguarding for states members and members of the public. I have a question too, because I'm just trying to understand the mechanism whereby this policy comes about, that we've had other situations where we've discussed exclusion of states members from premises, and this has been done in the context of our code of conduct. So is this policy something that's being produced under a separate standing order? I just would like to understand that. I nevertheless think that it's useful, and indeed referring back to those discussions, there could be an advantage of having more of this, a clear setting out of consequences if a states member is charged for a criminal offence, or indeed, you know, any type of even civil offences. And then I also would like to ask, therefore, and I know that a proposition brought by Deputy Kovash was suggesting this sort of work, to understand from the chair of the PPC if more policies of this nature are contemplated to be produced in this way. And then just to finish off about that safeguarding is something that needs to be evolved within the States Chamber, and of course an education element in the induction programme is useful in that respect too. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The next speaker is Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. It's just a matter of clarification, really. If I could ask the Chair of PPC to explain in the letter that will be sent out, Appendix 2, Section 8 says the exclusion places no restrictions on undertaking constituency work in the community, and then 2 paragraphs down it says, due to the nature of the charge laid against you and in order to safeguard members of the public, I ask that you do not privately meet in person with members of the public or constituents. I think that's confusing, and I would like some clarification as to how that could be addressed. And the second thing is, I wonder whether in forming these proposals, whether any consideration was given to the rehabilitation of the offender, if I can put that, in terms of the fact that they will still remain a States member and they will still be receiving their pay. Again, because people are publicly exposed as a member of this assembly, whether we should also communicate any intention to support any rehabilitation for the member who has obviously committed a crime.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. I'm a member of PBC, just to clarify that. And so to maybe answer the last point, we have to remember this is only for members, any hypothetical future members who have been charged with a serious offence on that list, but they haven't been convicted yet. So the rehabilitation is perhaps slightly different. I suppose there's a question about rehabilitation, in inverted commas, of somebody who's then being cleared, or the conviction's not being pursued or not being successful, and how they would come back from that. And I think that's probably beyond the scope of this, but something which PBC probably does need to consider. To answer Deputy Miles' point, I certainly raised in the presentations, I think in the public presentations we had with members, about broadening the scope of possible offences to include things like fraud. And my rationale was that if you're going to exclude somebody from the premises because they're a risk, physical risk, or to other members, or simply because other members feel uncomfortable or potentially threatened by that member, that's clearly a safeguarding issue, and that's the main motivation. But it did seem to me logical that if somebody's also untrustworthy because they might steal stuff, or they might, steal your information, then that might also be worth considering. But I think we stopped short of that because I think this was really focused on the offences that are there. And I think therefore the guidelines are probably to make sure that all of our future members' information is secure on premises. But I think that is a valid question, and this could well develop into the future. But I think this has been brought in to solve a very specific problem about usually when there are physical threats and somebody's being dealt with for those. I must admit that I think if there is one weakness in here that might need to be developed, it is that, and I've said this, I think in PPC and possibly in the drop-ins, in the sessions we've had, is that there is perhaps some mixed messages around the drop-in sessions. So I think Deputy Wilson is correct there. So it says that the policy ensures that attending an in-person constituency drop-in session is the primary concern is to safeguard any states, any GREF staff that would come along with them. Of course, that never used to be the case. So GREF staff attending surgeries, drop-in surgeries, is fairly new, and I think it's generally welcome, and it's not compulsory. Members can say if they do or don't want that person to come along. My concern is that later on, it says that a member in this situation is still allowed to attend an in-person drop-in session, but they will be advised not to do it in a private setting. And I think that probably doesn't go far enough for my liking. I think if somebody's being charged and they're still attending drop-in sessions, we haven't necessarily taken into account sufficiently the impact that might have on the public. So whilst we might think, okay, I don't want any of the GREF staff sitting with this person whilst they've got this charge hanging over their heads, why are we comfortable with members of the public doing that? And I think that it would be very difficult in practical terms for any member in that situation to credibly carry on with drop-in sessions, which might, of course, be joint drop-in sessions. I know some constituencies operate and it would put members in a difficult position to say, actually, I no longer want you at my surgery. And I think there will need to be some consideration about how that operates in multi-seat constituencies where there are multiple drop-ins from members. I think members know what I mean there. So I think this is something which can be tightened up in future. I think it is the right direction that a letter goes out saying you're advised not to do this, but I think that can be strengthened up. I would say, of course, though, that often in reality these things We can't always rely on a member to do the right thing. And this is why this is, I think it's really important, but the reality is that if a charge is so serious that a member is a risk to the public generally, then it's likely that they would be held in custody pending their trial and maybe not bailed. So that's not a given, of course. So I think those are the points I would make. I think generally, though, this is a very good direction of travel. I think it will need to be kept in review, and I hope that it doesn't need to be developed because it's never used. But I think it's so important to make sure that it's watertight, because when you're in that situation, when the theory becomes the practicality, the reality, that's not the right time to worry about whether you've got the guidelines and the code correct.
Thank you, Deputy Tadier. The next speaker is Deputy Dublé, followed by Deputy Howell, followed by Deputy Barbara Ward. So, Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. I'll be supporting this today, and I was a member of PPC when this was first raised, and I wanted to thank the chair of the VOG task force for bringing this to us in the first place. And I'm aware it's not a formal recommendation of the VOG task force, but the fact that it was brought to us by the task force should be noted. And the reason why I support it is it's common sense and it's protective, and it's a policy that is in place in workplaces and where we employees, this would be something that would be in effect. And I think if we look to other jurisdictions, and I won't name specific cases because I'm sure members will be aware of Guernsey, there have been cases in Scotland, and those two jurisdictions did not have any policy in place, and there was nothing that could be done to protect the members and the staff there. It's the staff actually that often feel the most vulnerable when there is a predatory individual in a position of power, and certainly in Westminster when they debated a similar measure, that's something that was raised, that actually there were staff members who had been victimised but had felt that they couldn't come forward because there was no exclusion policy and they couldn't bear to face their attacker in the halls of Westminster. And that's just such an alarming thing for any staff working on for a parliament to have to face. So I very much bear that in mind as well. And I note that some of the speeches have noted that it's not perfect, and I echo that, but we absolutely must approve this today because it's something that we don't want to have to bring something in very quickly like they had to in Scotland after something goes wrong. And as others have said, I very much hope that we never ever have to use this, and that all of our members are acting with the highest of personal standards. So, yeah, I will be supporting this today. One other thing I wanted to remark upon, I believe in Westminster, when they had the debate, although there was an attempt to change this, their threshold is actually at the point of arrest, which is interesting that we've set our threshold at the point of charge. I think that's true. I haven't confirmed that, but that's maybe something that we might want to reflect on in future if there are any further amendments to this and any cases. And as the first speaker said, it is very difficult because you're weighing up different human rights really here. So it's initially, I think, a difficult one to think upon, but for me it's very clear what the right thing to do is in this case, and that's to vote in favour of this.
Thank you. Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. I echo what Deputy Dublé's just said, and I thank PPC for bringing it. But I do still have the concerns that a member with a drop-in will be advised to not privately meet with members. I'm just wondering, perhaps the AG might be able to say whether that should be stronger, because I do worry that...
Well, I don't think that's a matter for the AG.
It's just, thank you, sir. I was just concerned that perhaps advised isn't strong enough, and perhaps they should be told. It's just, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Barbara Ward.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just a couple of questions for the chair of PPC on listening to what people have said. It's about risk. it may already happen, but as consideration to propose that all members, whether we're standing or we're proposing to be members, that we all have an enhanced DBS check, because there may have been something in our previous lives, because I feel very strongly, and we're talking about enhanced DBS, because our role is about the whole community. It's about families, children, older persons. I've had DBS checked for the past 40 years. It's, you know, but anyway, I would like for the PPC to give their opinion on that. But also on the ruling, it says about, you know, if convicted for 3 months or more, the member then loses their position. May I ask why this has not gone further and to be extended if someone's been convicted of 3 months or equivalent? And that is about community service, instead of spending time in jail. Community service is not a lesser punishment. It is meant to be there as equivalent. And I would go as far as saying that we should be saying and equivalent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate. And I call upon the Chair of PPC to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I will try to address some of the members' comments, and I thank everyone for their engagement. Deputy Ferry mentioned the presumption of innocence, and obviously I know that we had many long conversations at PPC about this very topic, but I'm pleased to report that he is now comfortable with the resulting document. Deputy Miles, were there any discussions about other offences? Yes, of course there were, but it was determined that it was only those that were deemed to carry the sentence of 2 years or more that would be covered in this instance. PPPC discussed whether to include other offences within the policy. I think it's fair to say that the committee agreed to limit the focus at this stage to ensure the focus was clear, but introducing the policy doesn't mean that other offences can be added at a later point if the Assembly wishes. She also mentioned the possibility of having a hung jury. Obviously, that would be quite an extreme circumstance, but it is perfectly possible. But I believe that would be the matter for the courts to determine, and these are only guidelines. Deputy Scott mentioned mechanisms, how the mechanisms came about, and whether it was a standing order. No, this is not a separate standing order. It is within PPC's terms of reference. She also mentioned having more education in induction process, which I'm sure that the GREF will have heard, and hopefully these sort of things will be included along with many others during the induction process. Deputy Wilson mentioned the constituency work and asking not to meet privately. There were a great deal of conversations about this very matter and how we should balance it up, because obviously it is a very difficult situation that a member who has been elected should technically be able to run their constituency, but at the same time, although it seems contradictory, we did wanted to make sure that we notified them that it would not be appropriate to meet, and this is a compromise that we've had to reach. She also mentioned rehabilitation of offenders, and of course there is always support given by the greffier, and obviously that has happened on occasions recently. Deputy Dublé mentioned about the point of arrest in other places, and we had a long discussion about this, and we went for being charged, and that was purely because of previous events. I'm sure Deputy Dublé will remember people getting arrested and then being released without charge considerably later, at a later date. I think I've covered most. Deputy Howe advised that the constituencies were the same comment about Deputy Wilson mentioned, which I have just addressed. And then Deputy Ward, Madam Deputy Ward, the consideration of enhanced DBS checks. Yes, now this was a detailed conversation because I raised the matter myself, as it happens, because I had a enhanced DBS check a couple of years ago, and I heard that members were allowed to apply to get a DBS check, and so I contacted member services and such, and I was told that it was only necessary, an enhanced DBS check, for ministers in certain departments, particularly children and and education and such like. I was quite disappointed to hear this, and so I had to pursue the matter myself to access the DBS check, as I'm sure Deputy Ward has done as well. And the other things you mentioned, another very important point actually from Madam Deputy Ward, the changing the 3 months or more in the law. Now this I have raised myself personally, and I hope that I will be able to do it by the end of this term, but maybe I should try to do it in the next term, to add suspended sentence, and also to mention community service. This is definitely something that I wanted to bring forward, and I truly hope that the next chair of PPC does amend it, because it does need changing, and also the 3 months for suspensions in other regards, for suspension from the Assembly rather than completely removed from the Assembly, I think should also be raised to about 6 months to give more options to PPC to impose restrictions on members who have transgressed particular laws. PPC initially considered this matter in 2024 following the introduction of a risk-based exclusion policy in the United Kingdom and feedback from the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force, as was mentioned by Deputy Dublé earlier. PPC believed that having a policy and automatic process for situations when a member has been charged with a serious violence or sexual offence to be appropriate and hopefully will not become necessary. So I think that most members will agree that this is something that's necessary and needs to be brought forward, so I will not delay the debate any longer and will ask members to support this proposed by PPC and call for the appel. Thank you.
Chair, just Deputy Scott has a point of clarification, so will you give way for a point of clarification?
Yes, sir, I will try.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, and I thank the... Oh, thank you, sir, and I thank the chair of the PPC. That the point of clarification was one of my questions just related to the proposition P.101 2025 brought in by Deputy Kovash to have more of these policies regarding the consequences when there's been charges for the breaches for criminal offences, and whether this is therefore a series of these sort of policies.
Sorry, sir, could I have clarification of what the question is?
Yes, Deputy Scott, are you able to clarify your question? Were you asking for? Is this part of a process where there will be more policies and procedures? Is that the thrust of your question?
Yes, thank you, sir. I was referring to Proposition 2025 P.101 brought by Deputy Kovash, requesting the PPC to review standing orders and in the context of policies for excluding members or suspending members from the state.
Thank you, Deputy. Chair.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, I understand exactly what the Deputy is asking now. Yes, this has been considered. It is an ongoing process, and there are actions that PPC will be taking at a later date, but unfortunately, because the term is coming to a close, it will be for the future PPC to address. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Ayat. So the appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. And if all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the proposition has been adopted unanimously, 43 votes pour, no votes contre, and no abstentions. So we move on to P36, which is the draft shipping IMO Conventions Jersey Amendment Law, which has been lodged by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. The main respondent is the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Shipping IMO Conventions Jersey Amendment Law 2000, a law to amend the Shipping Jersey Law 2002, the Shipping Oil Pollution Liability and Compensation Jersey Law 2015, and the Employment Jersey Law 2003 in relation to the implementation of International Maritime Organisation conventions and for connected purposes. The states, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, in 2022, Jersey was audited against what is known as the Triple I Code. It was an audit conducted by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency from the UK on behalf of the International Maritime Organisation. The IMO Instruments Implementation Code, which is the Triple I Code, provides a global standard to enable states to meet their obligations as flag, port and coastal states against the international conventions they have signed up to, such as SOLAS and MARPOL, SOLAS being safety of life at sea and MARPOL being marine pollution laws. The audit found that Jersey's maritime legislation did not accurately reflect the international conventions it has signed up to or joined. This was because updates to relevant IMO conventions had not been properly incorporated in Jersey's maritime law when it was drafted, meaning references to the IMO conventions in Jersey legislation appear as references to the version of the convention that existed at the time the reference came into force. As IMO conventions are updated periodically, approximately every few years, Jersey's legislation has thus fallen behind on reflecting subsequent updates to the relevant conventions, meaning that Jersey is non-compliant against the Triple I Code. To address this finding, a legislative project has been initiated, consisting of two propositions, and the first of which is the one before us today, the Draft Shipping IMO Jersey Amendment Law. It provides the States Assembly, via amendments to primary law, with the power to amend relevant regulations with what we call ambulatory references. Ambulatory references will allow future updates to applicable maritime conventions to be automatically applied to Jersey. The Draft Shipping IMO Conventions Jersey Amendment Law will lay the foundations for subordinate legislation, such as the regulations and orders that sit under the primary law, to be amended to include ambulatory references. Once the project is complete, any reference to an IMO convention will always reference the current version of the IMO convention or UK legislation, ensuring Jersey's legislation does not fall behind. The changes will help to ensure Jersey's reputation within the Red Ensign Group and wider international maritime community is upheld through the demonstration of robust compliance with international maritime obligations, and will strengthen Jersey's position prior to the next audit in September of this year. Sir, this draft law updates our legal mechanisms. It does not change current operating models. Jersey's existing operating model already follows the Triple I Code, allowing a flag state to delegate surveys while maintaining an effective oversight programme. The draft law means that Jersey's regulations will always mirror current IMO standards, while surveys and inspections continue to be delivered by authorised inspectors under Jersey's oversight, exactly as the IMO framework intends. Any operational changes to the way inspections are managed, which are not proposed or necessary, would require separate decisions and would come with their own resource assessment. The report accompanying the draft law explicitly states that there are no financial or resource implications arising from adoption of this law, and that remains correct. More broadly, the changes that I placed before the Assembly today form part of a much wider suite of measures during this government's update of Jersey's maritime laws. These have included ships registry regulations, Shipping Jersey Law 2002, and the Inshore Safety Harbour regulations. So there is no doubt in my mind that today we are in a much better position with regard to our compliance with international maritime rules and regulations than we were 4 years ago. And this enables Jersey to more successfully continue to be a flag, port or coastal state. We try to do all three, sir. So in conclusion, the III Code is the IMO's framework to ensure states, as flag, port or coastal states, implement and maintain current convention requirements. In 2022, it was found that the static references in Jersey law are out of date against the current conventions such as SOLAS or MARPOL. The solution is basically in this first proposition to amend the primary law to permit ambulatory references, and then secondly, in future propositions, to update those regulations in order to use those ambulatory references. As a result, we will have, for Jersey, automatic alignment to current convention text or corresponding UK legislation where referenced, fewer amendments, a stronger III Code compliance regime, a Red Ensign Group reputation that's upheld, and will be audit ready by September 2026. I hope that members agree with me that this is an important step to take to maintain Jersey's reputation and standing in the international maritime community. So with that, sir, I'd like to move the proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Is the proposition seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Councillor of St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. Whilst I'm supportive of the proposals being on the table, sir, one little question I'd like to ask. There's a suggestion there's no cost to government. Would the Minister know, sir, is there a cost to the ports of Jersey, who obviously will be the body administering the proposed regulations? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatar. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. This is just to reassure members that our scrutiny panel, Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, has looked at this. We've been briefed on it, we've asked questions, and we're content with what's in front of us. So the panel understands that the draft shipping, the IMO conventions amendment seeks to update Jersey's maritime legislation to bring it in line with the IMO conventions, and that the island has signed up to, and to address the audit findings that Jersey maritime legislation was no longer reflecting the latest versions of the IMO convention. So we understand that the ambulatory provisions here will make sure that as the provisions are updated, because they are international and global standards, that they will automatically be reflected in the Jersey context. And based on the information provided in briefings and written correspondence, the panel is satisfied that the proposed draft law allows Jersey to fulfil its international obligations and to put in place mechanisms to maintain compliance with the IMO conventions. And I leave the comments at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Does any other member?
Sir?
Yeah, sorry, yes, St Saviour.
I still haven't got that flare gun yet, sir, but I'm working on it. This is a good piece of housekeeping, sir, and I congratulate the Minister on bringing it forward, especially with oil pollution, etc. Very topical at the moment with world events. Just a query regarding Part 4, Article 9. Gives the name of the law and provides it for it to come into force on the day to be specified by the Minister by order. Just to clarify, if this is approved by members, that it will be signed off by the Minister in the very near future.
Thank you, Conatar. Does any other Deputy Barish? Yes.
So the draft law was referred to the Legislation Advisory Panel by the Minister as a consultee. And one of the issues raised was in relation to the question of ambulatory references. Ambulatory references are relevant in this draft law in two different respects. Firstly, in relation to the applicability of international conventions or agreements, and secondly, as to legislation, United Kingdom legislation. In relation to the applicability to international conventions, the scrutiny panel, in its very helpful report, stated the panel asked why the use of ambulatory referencing is considered necessary in this context. The Minister explained that ambulatory referencing is an important mechanism which would allow for future updates to applicable maritime conventions to take place automatically. And that, of course, is true. The contrary argument is that if a convention is materially changed by the convention parties, then it should not be imposed in Jersey automatically without consideration by the minister or by the states of the consequences, both political and financial, of the changes to the convention. And the minister very helpfully responded to this point by including in Article 5(7) of the draft law. Nothing in this law affects the duties of the minister under the treaties Jersey Law 2026, hopefully. The treaties law requires that any convention be referred to the States Assembly for approval, but exempts from that requirement any amendment to a treaty which does not have any material consequence for the island. So that point made by the panel has been adequately covered by the minister. The second point in relation to legislation is a little more problematic. The principle is that ambulatory references are unconstitutional and inappropriate. That's the starting point. Because what is happening in relation to ambulatory references is that the United Kingdom Parliament or the minister is, the UK minister, is effectively legislating for Jersey without the consent of the states. A change in United Kingdom legislation which automatically applies in Jersey offends against that basic principle. The argument in favour of ambulatory references is that it saves time for officials. And as the scrutiny panel again recorded in its report, the minister's explanation was further, if ambulatory referencing is not adopted, a project to update the relevant law or regulations will need to be undertaken every time a maritime convention, which Jersey has already signed up to, is updated. Given the volume of work and resource required to update legislation across the Economy Department, the Law Officers Department, and the Law Drafting Office, this is deemed unsustainable and inefficient. One might also add, in support of that proposition, that ambulatory references can only be included in legislation by the states. And what the states can do, the states can obviously undo. I expressed reservations to the Minister about whether this was a good enough reason, because I know that the Minister is one of those who is very much aware of the desirability of maintaining Jersey's constitutional privileges, that is, the right to legislate for ourselves. In an earlier draft of the law, there was a provision for the Minister to be able, by order, to introduce ambulatory references. And for me, as I indicated to the Minister, that was a bridge too far. And I'm grateful to the Minister that that particular provision has been withdrawn. Having said that, there are some references in the explanatory note to ambulatory references being included in orders, but I assume that those are mistakes. They are to be found in the fourth paragraph of the explanatory note, and I hope that those are just mistakes, and perhaps the Minister would be kind enough to confirm that. The question remains, though, of balancing the question of convenience for officials with the important question of constitutional privilege. And I would be grateful if the Minister could let me know, or let the members know, if he has this information, how often changes to legislation in relation to IMO conventions are actually made. What is the extent of the problem? Are there changes to legislation once a year, or 5 times a year, or 10 times a year, or does it only happen once every 2 or 3 years? The more often that one has to legislate to keep up compliance with the convention, clearly the stronger the argument is for the convenience of ambulatory references. But conversely, if it doesn't happen very often, the fact that it's convenient for officials not to have to worry about these conventions and any changes to them, convenient to the Law Officers Department and to the Legislative Drafting Office, does not seem to me to be an overriding imperative. The IMO conventions, sir, may well meet the test, and I hope the Minister will be able to persuade us of that. I am particularly sensitive about ambulatory references because I think I was the first Minister to introduce them. And I rather fear that I have brought a Trojan horse into the arena. I introduced ambulatory references in relation to the question of United Nations and European Union sanctions, because those sanctions kept on changing. And it was convenient for us to legislate to ensure that our sanctions regime was kept up to date by bringing in ambulatory references in regard to those sanctions. But conventions and legislation are a rather different matter, particularly, if I may say so, United Kingdom legislation, because we have legislated to make sure that the UK cannot legislate for us without the matter being referred to the States. So it is curious for this Assembly now to legislate, to say United Kingdom legislation can be changed and brought into a force in Jersey automatically without any reference to this Assembly at all. I hope, sir, that in the future the Assembly will regard any reference to ambulatory references as a red flag. Ambulatory references should be wholly exceptional. And otherwise, I fear that we may legislate away our constitutional rights by the back door, and that would be a very sad state of affairs.
Thank you, Deputy Panache. Deputy Corst.
So I wasn't sure to do this by way of clarification from the last speaker. I'm sure he will recall when he introduced that legislation, the conversations that he and I and his officials had, which were very much along the lines of the speech he's just made in relation to this. History has proven in that case the ambulatory provisions were absolutely correct. Who knew at that point that we would have such global turmoil and have such frequent issuance of sanctions from the UN, the UK now rather than the EU, and therefore they were absolutely right. I agree entirely with his general principle. They should be used sparingly, and I do think that in relation to international conventions, which must flow through, otherwise we're in breach of the convention, I think an argument can be made. But I also think in this case the Minister did the right thing in passing the legislation to the Legislation Advisory Panel, because I suspect he hoped for this exact conversation and debate to take place in doing so. So I think it's right that the debate takes place here. But I see no reason not to support him in including them in this legislation. But the backstop position should be that we don't include ambulatory provisions.
Thank you. Deputy Wall.
These are going to be some very humble questions after all of that. What practical changes will ship owners, operators or the harbour master see as a result of the amendment? First question. Will there be a new inspection requirement, reporting duties or certification processes? And does the amendment impose, and this is the other side of Constable Jackson's question, does the amendment impose any additional costs on local maritime businesses? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Wall. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? If no other member wishes to speak, then, Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to pick up on the points on sovereignty, because obviously I think we all agree on the principle that we should be sovereign and that we should not hand away those powers easily. But I do see the situation slightly more subtly, I guess. I think I was a minister also, I think, who proposed a ambulatory provision. It was in reference to the wildlife law, I think, and to ensure that we stayed up to date with various provisions in international agreements. And I think it's implicit, if we are to take a full role in those kind of agreements, it is implicit that we, simply by signing up to these conventions or agreements or organizations, that we do accept we are trading a certain amount of sovereignty. That is implicit in joining. We share, we donate, if you like, some of our legislative sovereignty to those organizations. And I don't have in principle a problem with that. And I do think also that in the case of a small jurisdiction, something I've referred to before, the question of a small jurisdiction with limited resources, limited lawmaking resource, we have to decide where we want to put that resource. We have a huge field of play in terms of things that we can legislate for and want to legislate for. And an ambulatory provision on technical matters such as before us in this proposition feels to me to be a proportionate response to the fact that we are a member of this organisation. And it is a sovereign act to decide to delegate a certain amount of our sovereign power to someone else. And I feel like that is also a legitimate expression of sovereignty. And so our sovereign act here is simply to say that we agree that in principle we will align with these organisations and the rules that they bring forward, and we can always reverse that at a future date. So I fully accept the principle Deputy Balash and Deputy Gorst have referred to, but I do have a slightly more relaxed feel about it in relation to this particular proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Renouf. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir, and I'm really grateful to all the members who spoke. It was very interesting, short but interesting. And I'll start with Deputy Balash because I think, and I'm grateful to Deputy Balash for acknowledging that the truth that he knows that something like ambulatory referencing is something that I myself am very sceptical about. I also, as Deputy Balash does, although he does a much better job of it than me, see one of my roles in this assembly as guarding Jersey's constitutional independence. And I do understand the work that the Deputy has done over the past few years to ensure that's the case. And the treaties law is one of those examples of that work. But much as Deputy Renouf said better than I could, this is the Sovereign Act to relax our sovereignty in this area. And it is true that I do not like the idea of automatically updating our legislation in general. But I do think that there are some practical areas where it is by far the better way for us to act. And it tends to be in those areas which are very technical. They're about practical matters and international matters. And they're also, as in this case, about Jersey's reputation in a particular area. So in this area, we are a small island. We are a maritime island, always have been. But it is, to my mind, somewhat of an embarrassment that when it comes to the International Maritime Organization's conventions, we are found to be wanting in various areas, because there's a reality, as much as we might like to think that we have the law drafting provisions and capabilities and that we're on top of these matters. We clearly aren't. We are found wanting. Our audit has found that we have not maintained compliance with conventions such as the Safety of Life at Sea Convention. And I think that's also extremely important, is the matter of safety. I do think in areas such as this, we are seeking to be an international, I don't like the word player in this area, but that's not in any way to diminish it. We want to be seen as a flag state. We have our own ships registry. As a port state, the port of St Helier is an international port, and as a coastal state, because that's what Jersey is. But if we are continually found to be wanting in that area, we will lose those statuses, most notably the flag and the port state. And that's not something that I think Jersey should put itself at risk of. And so, whilst there is a constitutional implication, I do agree with Deputy Renouf that this is the Sovereign Act here we're being asked to do here. And I do believe that the reason that members should feel or can feel comfortable in that is because of the very specific nature of these conventions. They are about life at sea. They are about safety. They are about protecting the environment. And there are other areas such as standards of training, standards of certification, standards of watchkeeping on vessels. These are not, in my mind, matters that are really negotiable by the Assembly. Should we have lower standards of safety for our shipping vessels? We could choose to do that, but I think that puts us in a very difficult situation should we choose to do that. So I feel personally, and I would not have brought this proposition to the Assembly if I didn't personally feel comfortable that this is an area we can give up that modicum of sovereignty, because I think the worst consequence is Jersey falling behind in its obligations as a maritime state. From Conatable, Sambrellard and Deputy War, similar questions about the cost to ports of Jersey and about the position for local businesses, but in all sorts of areas, ships, fishing vessels, etc. There's no direct cost to ports of Jersey per se, but we don't know where the conventions may be amended in the future, and when they are amended and updated, there are costs that come in on that. So, for instance, shipping vessels will need to be to a certain safety standard. We help those vessels and those vessel owners through the Marine Support Scheme. So that's one of the key reasons for creating a Marine Support Scheme, was to enable vessel owners to be able to comply with safety regulations. I think as well, there was always a backstop. Yes, we could choose not to oblige those vessel owners to comply with new safety regulations, but there will also, I believe, come a point where the insurance companies would then refuse to insure them. And that would then mean their livelihoods disappearing. And I often think that this is something we should think about when it comes to such international conventions, is the ultimate arbiter in many cases of whether we should or shouldn't be complying is the insurance industry, because they will just pull their cover. And when they do that, an entire sector can fall, because without insurance, you cannot operate. And for the Constables and Saviour, the law is, so this will likely come into force in this next Assembly, because principally because we need royal assent for these amendments. But once the royal assent is forthcoming, it will be upon the next minister to sign that order, and the intention is to do so swiftly. So we have the audit coming up later this year, and the intention is to sign that order before that audit takes place. So, sir, I believe I've answered all the questions, sir, and with that, I would ask for the appel. Thank you, sir.
The appel has been called for. I ask all members to return to their seats. All members have now returned to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can report that the principles have been adopted unanimously, 43 votes for, no votes contre, and no abstentions. Does the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise this matter? No, sir. Then we move on to second reading. Minister, how do you wish to propose the articles in second reading?
If I may propose them en bloc, please.
Are the articles seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on the articles? If no member wishes to speak on the articles, I call upon members to show if they support the articles. Those members against? The articles are adopted. Minister, do you wish to propose the matter in third reading?
Yes, if I may, sir.
Is that seconded? Yes. Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Minister.
Sorry, I was too slow there, sir. I was just getting the
Chair,
document.
yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. So I did want to ask, it was a question that was raised by Deputy War earlier, about the practical implication that this will have. I noticed the Minister's comments, and I don't know if I read too much into it when he said that this will take a while to come in principally because it needs to receive royal assent, but will there be any desire or reason to delay the implementation for other reasons after it's got royal assent, sir? And the reason I'm asking that is that I'd like to question whether or not there are currently a number of ships, commercial ships in Jersey, which don't meet either current standards. I'm led to believe that that may be the case, and that there's a requirement to give them time to be brought up to scratch. I'm wondering if the Minister can give us any information around that, and whether or not this, what we're passing today, will actually set effectively a much higher bar for those vessels, and whether what the time frame is if there are scenarios where certain boats don't meet certain standards. Are they going to simply be stopped from sailing? Will insurance in reality be denied to them, so effectively meaning they can't operate? And what does he think the timeline is in practical terms for that, and what support would his department give to those individuals and those operators should that prove to be the case?
Thank you, Chair. Does any other member wish to speak in the third? Sorry, I can't see where that's coming from. Constable St Brillard.
Thank you, sir. And really to wrap up from the point of view of costs I alluded to earlier on, I'm just keen to be sure, and I'm sure the Minister would support this, that any implications on the fishing industry in terms of costs don't go through the line. In the event that inspections should be required to comply with the regulations, those inspection costs inevitably get passed to fishing vessels at that level who can little afford it. And I just would ask that the Minister keeps this in mind when the conversations developed with the ports. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conato. Any other member wish to speak in third reading? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir. First, before I answer questions, first of all, I'd like to thank the members, the Chair and the members of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel for their work and for their comments paper, as well as my officers who have worked on this for the last few years. I'm very grateful for them. To both the Conotable St Brillard and Deputy Tudyer, it isn't possible for me to say what costs may be in the future in terms, because I don't know where the conventions will go in the future in terms of safety of life at sea and what requirements will be. But what I do know is that we are, at the moment, the Jersey fishing fleet is undertaking a number of inspections, surveys, to determine the safety of their vessels. And naturally, some of those vessels are coming up short, and they do have rectification measures to take place. There is no one size fits all. Every vessel has different requirements. Some may be of a standard where the cost to, improve them, bring them up to standard is greater than the vessel owner wishes to bear. Each one will be individual. What I do know is that from my perspective is I want to try and help, and this is why we have the Marine Support Scheme in place. I want to try to help those vessels reach the standards, and I think there is a job in us doing that. We have tragically seen, accidents in the fishing industry over the years. I can't point to any part of the conventions that they may or may not have complied with at the time, but what it tells me is obviously fishing and being at sea is a dangerous dangerous work, dangerous occupation, and a dangerous area of recreation as well. And so it is upon us to ensure that those vessels are of an appropriate standard. From the timing of any orders, there's no, I have no knowledge of any desire to push out the signing of an order to bring this into force because of a lack of compliance in the fleet or any fleet that Jersey has. As far as I'm concerned, once royal assent is provided, the Minister, whether that's me or somebody else, would sit down within days of that and sign that sign the law into force through an order. Not because actually the pressing point here is the Triple I Code audit which is taking place in September of this year. So that would be something that we would not want to miss in terms of this legislation. So there are impacts in terms of vessel owners and the costs of compliance, but we are talking things such as safety compliance and pollution control compliance, standards of, as I said, watch keeping and training. These are all things which are absolutely vital, and I think we've seen you know, how important, if we are to prevent accidents at sea, which is far better than than reacting after accidents at sea, then we do need to ensure that our fleets, the various fleets that we have in Jersey, are to a high enough standard. And that's, you know, why these conventions don't impact recreational users. The same has to be said for recreational users. Safety at sea is absolutely vital. And I would, ask any recreational boat owner to please ensure that they understand the kind of what I would say are their obligations to maintain safe vessels at sea and how to operate safely at sea. So there is no, I cannot point to the future and say that the costs will be X or the costs will be Y. It will be different on individual vessels and individual companies according to the standards of their vessels. With that, sir, I ask for the appel.
Ask for the appel. The appel's called for. I invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the principles have been adopted unanimously. 43 votes for, no votes contre, and no abstentions. And we move on to the next item of public business, which is the Draft Agriculture and Fisheries Loans Law, which is P37. And that's also been lodged by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Main respondent is the Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. So I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Agriculture and Fisheries Loans Jersey Law 2000, a law to provide financial assistance to the agricultural and fishing industries and for connected purposes. The states, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, this is yet another of the 1974 laws that I've had in my sight for some reason. Because our current agricultural loans law, sir, dates back to 1974 and as the name suggests, only applies to agriculture. Since then, both the rural and marine economic frameworks have made clear that government-enabled capital investment is vital for long-term resilience and productivity of those sectors. In 2023, the Assembly agreed to recapitalise the Agricultural Loans Fund to the sum of at least £10 million. And I welcome the Minister for Treasury and Resources having delivered the second £5 million allocation earlier this year. Since reinstating the scheme at the end of 2024, we have already seen strong demand and clear evidence of need. By early 2026, we had received 41 expressions of interest had been received to a value of £16.6 million. 11 of those have been recommended for approval by the board to a total of £5.7 million. And 8 of those 11 have been fully or partially delivered. £3.3 million has actually passed so far to the agriculture and marine sectors. These figures demonstrate both the strong need for the investment these loans unlock, and also the high bar to entry that ensures public funding is allocated effectively. The draft law before us today does 3 key things. Firstly, it replaces the outdated 1974 law with the modern loan system. Secondly, it extends loan support to fisheries for the very first time, And thirdly, it reflects current rural and marine practices and support. So the law establishes a new agriculture and fisheries loans fund. It reconstitutes the loans board, updates eligibility criteria to align with our rural and marine support schemes, and clearly defines the types of investment that can be supported. It also introduces robust repayment, enforcement and compliance provisions to ensure public funds are managed responsibly. This is about parity, productivity and sustainability. It brings our legislation into the 21st century, ensuring the £10 million fund is used effectively and strengthens the foundations of two sectors that play a vital role in our island's future. There's no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure the Assembly's mind, that agriculture and fisheries matter. They matter to our identity, to our environment, and to our food security. This law ensures that they will have the modern financial tools they need to thrive in an incredibly capital-hungry environment. Importantly, this new law significantly strengthens governance and safeguards. It modernises eligibility and introduces enforcement powers and offences for misuse of the scheme. These measures provide a clearer, more transparent and accountable system than the one that was created in 1974. The law aligns fully, as you would expect, with the Rural Economy Framework and the Marine Economy Framework, both of which were approved by the Council of Ministers in 2022 and have been used to great success over the last 4 years. These frameworks underscore why both sectors require access to affordable capital investment if they are to remain productive, resilient and economically viable. Members themselves have endorsed the recapitalisation of the Agricultural Loans Fund to at least £10 million. But this significant investment potential cannot be fully realised without a modern legislative basis to support it. But this modern legislative basis comes with continuity and stability. All existing loans and appointments are carried forward through transitional provisions, ensuring that no borrower is disadvantaged and that the administration of the scheme remains seamless. Finally, and importantly, this is not an expansion of government spending. Administration continues to be funded from within the recapitalised fund, with no new public sector posts created. And I'm grateful to Jersey Business Limited for having delivered the scheme so far within an agreed budget. Sir, this law is fundamentally about enabling investment. Investment in productive businesses, in food security, in our environment, in the resilience of two long-standing and strategically important industries, and in the wider economic and cultural fabric of our island. I therefore invite members to support the principles of this draft law. And as such, I move the proposition, sir.
Thank you very much. Are the principles seconded? Does any member wish to speak? Deputy Tallier.
Thank you, sir. It's just to say that, again, this is our panel which this falls to from a scrutiny perspective. We are happy to support this, is the short speech that I'm going to make. We have issued comments to that effect. We do think it makes sense to include fisheries within the agricultural loan scheme. You know, we're mindful of the fact that we would hope, and we have asked questions to make sure that the fund can accommodate both agriculture and fisheries, and we're satisfied that it can do. We think it would need to be kept in review, and also depending how long it goes on for, sir. Yep, no other comments to make.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Councillor Wilson-Brillard.
I would concur with the points made by the previous speaker in terms of the fishing industry. So the fishing industry is in a parlous state at the moment, confronted by additional costs and obviously competition from our French neighbours. So I think it's essential that they would receive support in this scheme as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatel. Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. And I just stand to endorse wholeheartedly the proposal from the Minister here. Members will know that the agricultural loan system hadn't been used for a while previous to 2023. And it was a great embarrassment to me after I brought my proposition how long it took to get funds to farmers for loans during 2024 and 2025. So I'm immensely grateful to the Minister for updating this law. It will make life easier. It will extend the scheme to the fishing industry as well, which is another good thing. But this law desperately needs updating, loaning money to farmers, money that is then repaid with interest to government. It's not a grant, it's a loan. This scheme gives the industry an immense amount of confidence. It gives them a sight of the future, the ability to invest long term, which is just what we need. It allows our young people in the industry to see a future for themselves. So I'm grateful to the Minister for bringing this forward. It gets my wholehearted support.
Thank you, Deputy Luce. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And it's just a quick one. Obviously, this is repealing the 1974 law, which operates under the regulations of the law. And I'm not sure whether we've got regulations lodged under this law as well. That would come in at the same time. And it's just to understand the kind of the timeline for this at a principal level as to when this law would transition. Without going into the articles too much, of course, it's Article 11 here that would repeal the regulations on that actually allow the law to operate. And I'm just wondering where the Minister is with when this takes into effect, because, of course, when this takes into effect will change when fisheries might fall officially under the law and any of the new provisions would take effect. And my second question would be, if the Minister has drafted regulations, what his principle is around interest rate setting. The states debated the change, obviously, to the law last time. I think it was a very quick change to the regulations from 6.5% to 3%, and whether the Minister understands of his view that interest rates will still be set by regulation, or whether his plan is that interests are set through another subordinate mechanism and a plan for flexibility or not, because, of course, in undertaking a loan, especially in an industry like this, those undertaking it may wish to have more secured rates of interest, not the kind of the level of flexibility that we see base rate tracking interest would be. And it's again for whether the industry have confidence that they know that the payables on those long into the future, or at least can plan and chart their repayments accordingly. So it's just his plans for that, where regulations are in this, and I do apologise if I've missed them lodged later. I haven't seen lodged regulations under this to come in at the same time, so that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Deputy. The Constable of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And a very brief question, as it's been debated before. Will the Minister kindly advise whether agriculture for this purpose does extend to the cannabis growing industry? Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles?
Sir, may I ask the Constable of St Mary's to please repeat? He said I missed that. Sorry, I was reading something.
Yes, I'm sorry. The question simply is, does agriculture for the purposes of this legislation extend to the growing of cannabis plants?
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I thank members for speaking. I thank as well the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel for the scrutiny on this legislation. So I'll start with the Constable of St Mary's question. So yes, because the medicinal cannabis sector is classed as agriculture, but with an important caveat, this Assembly itself has restricted the use of the agricultural loan scheme to the medicinal cannabis sector. So a maximum of 10% of the loan scheme can be used for the medicinal cannabis sector. So of the £10 million fund, a maximum of £1 million could be used in that sector. So it can be used, but with that significant restriction. Thank you, sir. And obviously the activity has to be classed as bona fide agriculture at the time. With regard to Deputy Curtis's question about regulations, so the regulations will be coming in later this year. We are working on them at the moment. We want to do this as quickly as possible for the reasons that I've stated about the existing law not really being, or being extremely difficult to use. I know that officers have worked for a long time with Treasury and the Law Officers Department just to get everything in place so loans could be made, and it's been a very, very stressful process, let's say, for all involved. So this law will make it much easier. So yes, this will, the regulations we intend to present later this year. This law itself will need royal assent, so that obviously brings in some element of delay. So it'll be to the next assembly to approve those regulations, but I would expect to see it being done as quickly as possible. So yes, other than that, I thank Deputy Luce for his work with his previous proposition, but also his continued work with the agriculture and marine sectors. I'm very pleased that the Economy Department and the Environment Department work very well together on both of those sectors. And we understand that, you know, the capital investment required to go into farming or to go into fishing is so significant that there is support that's needed. And unfortunately, because of commercial realities, it's very difficult for those sectors to get lending, to access lending via the commercial sector. And so it is a case of the state stepping in as the lender of last resort in this case.
Minister, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Deputy Moore has raised a point of order.
Oh, of course.
Deputy Moore, you have a point of order to raise.
Thank you, sir, but I'm happy to bring it after the Minister has
Very well.
completed his...
Very well.
Can you clarify, is it a point of order or
Well,
clarification?
I'm told it's a point of order. In terms of standing orders provide that in order to raise a point of order on a matter or privilege or immunity that requires an immediate ruling by the presiding officer, is that what you're asking to make me to make an immediate ruling?
Sir, I think a ruling should be taken prior to our voting, and I have raised this in correspondence with the Deputy Greffier.
So what is the ruling that you're seeking?
So it's really a matter of good order. I believe that perhaps some members may need to consider whether they own companies that may provide goods or services that are outlined in the schedule to this proposition, sir.
Well, I'm not sure that is a point of order, because the obligation is on members to raise declarations of interest. It's not a matter of privilege or immunity requiring an immediate ruling from me. It's a question, if it's a question of interests, then the obligation is on members to declare interests. So in my view, that is not a point of order requiring a ruling on a matter of privilege or immunity. So, Minister, will you continue, please?
Thank you, sir. So I was actually about to come to the end. So I was saying, so I wanted to thank Deputy Luce, and I was saying how our departments, I'm really pleased that both the Environment Department, which obviously looks principally at the regulatory side, and the Economy Department, which looks at the commercial and the business side, we have been working very well to try to ensure that the agriculture sectors and the marine fishing sectors have a future. I sadly agree with the Connétables and Brillard that the fishing sector is facing significant challenges. But I'm also pleased to say that my department's been working with the Environment Department and is currently working with the Environment Department to try to chart a way forward for the sector. I'm happier to be able to say that the agriculture sector, since this Assembly first sat in 2022, the agriculture sector we have, as an Assembly, and should be incredibly proud of this, we have really turned around the agriculture sector. It isn't a case that it's a sector that is on its knees where it truly was in 2022, but it faces significant challenges, and it will continue to, not least because every other agriculture sector around us, France, the UK, Netherlands, Germany, all of them, they're all highly subsidised. And so our farmers who have no scale, because they're obviously very small farms, also can only compete on something like a level playing field if we as an assembly and as a government support them financially as well. Those are obviously matters I'll bring up in a later debate, but I do ask for members to support this agricultural loans law. And I almost forgot which reading we were in, sir, but I believe it's the first
Principles.
still. It's
Yes.
the principles, thank you, sir.
Principles.
So I move the principles in that case, sir.
Do you ask for the appel?
And
or-
I ask for the appel, thank you.
The appel's called for. I invite members to return to their seats. If all members have had the chance to return to their seats, I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have now had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the principles have been adopted unanimously, 44 votes pour, no votes contre, and no abstentions. Does the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise this matter?
No, sir.
So we move on to...
Sir, if I may, I noticed that you used the wrong title for the scrutiny panel.
Oh,
It should be the Economic and International
I
Affairs.
beg your
Scrutiny
pardon.
Panel. It was the correct respondent, the wrong title.
Beg your pardon. Yeah. It's
It's an understandable mistake, so I had to double check myself before there are comments.
Well, at least it's now clarified, so thank you. So we move on to second reading, the debate on the articles, and how do you wish to propose the articles, Minister?
I wish to propose them en bloc, please.
Are the articles seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the articles? The Connotab of Grouville.
Thank you, sir. Just to bring a little bit of perspective, again, I like to provide a little bit of perspective. When I first learned to drive a tractor, sir, they cost just under £2,000 brand new, and they're actually worth more now than they were then. That the modern tractor, the John Deere 6120N, which is the one we all see in the countryside, there was one advertised this morning, second-hand, 6 years old, £54,000. That gives you an idea of what sort of costs modern farmers are facing, sir. So I just thought I'd point that out to the Assembly.
In relation to the articles? Very well. Does any other member wish to speak on the articles? If no other member wishes to speak on the articles, then I close the debate and I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir, and I'm very grateful to Constable de Grouville for providing that perspective. I think he's absolutely correct, and I invite any member to visit a farm and just ask the farmers, point to different pieces of equipment and ask the price, because it's jaw-dropping. And quite simply, that £54,000 tractor, I imagine 6 years ago, was more like £80,000 or more when it was to be bought brand new. And then you think of all the different pieces of equipment that one farm uses, and you're talking about millions of pounds worth of capital investment. And obviously, it's the same for the fisheries sector. A vessel costs lots of money, even the small vessels that Jersey uses. So it is really important that we provide them with a source of capital. None of which is to do with the articles, I appreciate, sir, but I don't call for the appel, but I propose the articles, sir.
Very well. So those members who are in favour of adopting the articles kindly show. Those members against? The articles are adopted. Do you wish to propose the matter in third reading, Minister?
Yes, please, sir.
Is the matter seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Tellier.
Thank you, sir. I was expecting the Constable of Grouville earlier to start his comments by the Uncle Albert style of during the war, but he didn't, sir. What I would like to say in the third reading, sir, is that I was pleased that both the Environment Minister and Deputy Morel, as the Economic Minister, said that this is very much just a loan scheme. And I don't think we should belittle that, but we do have to remember that there are bigger countries on our doorstep that give grants to their farmers, that give grants to their fishers, and don't necessarily expect them back in return. And I do know from my experience, not just on scrutiny, but having attended the farming conference, and it wasn't my first by any means, but I was pleased to be able to sit in a room with them and have dinner. I probably should have put that on my interests of lobbying if I haven't done already. I'll check that that's been recorded. So that they were very grateful for the scheme, and that they do feel that there is support being given by this minister and by this government. And it doesn't mean that everything is necessarily rosy in the garden or in the field, sir. And I suspect that fishers will also feel the same about being included in this scheme. But I think that there will be some who use the loans for productivity, so that they may be in a relatively good place already, and access to the loan at a relatively low, or certainly a fixed rate that they find affordable, that they can pay back to government over a period of time. That will help them with their productivity. But I am concerned that for others, it may just be a case of getting a loan to stand still. And I think, and that may well be a lifeline for them, may be able to keep them operating. And I think that the juxtaposition of this debate with the one we've just had about the increase, or at least I think it is an increase in safety standards that we're going to see for commercial fishing vessels in Jersey. The reason I raised my question earlier in that debate, sir, was because I have been told by someone in the know that there are still a lot of fishing vessels that are not meeting the required standards, and that there seems to be a traffic light system whereby those that are obviously in a fall very short of the standards won't be allowed to go out and operate until they've met the requirements. But there are quite significant ones which don't meet the requirements, which will need to be given time to get up to scratch. And I'm wondering, in fact, whether sometimes this loan scheme might be used for that purpose. And so we do have to be mindful of the fact that there is, I think, this very necessary red tape which is coming through, because it is about health and safety, it is about the safety of the fishers in particular, and about maritime standards, pollution standards. But it may well be that government is actually having to help in this regard, and that may be an unintended consequences of some of the other standards that are being required, sir. So certainly for my part, speaking as a backbencher now, I certainly welcome the scheme. I think we do need to monitor it, and I think we probably do need to make sure that it's perhaps in future becomes honed, because I think that the board that's set up will perhaps want the ability to discriminate, if I can use that in the literal sense, from businesses who perhaps merit it most, who are going to make the most of the loans. And maybe if in future we want to target loans towards those who feature organic farming, farming that is maybe going to serve a particular important function in terms of sustainability and for local provision as well, sir. So I think it's not an easy thing to do, and it's certainly something where we could probably always do more, but I think it is a good scheme, and it's one that's valuable to our local industry, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Tadier. Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Lewis.
So I rise, Deputy Tadier mentioned the farming conference, a hugely successful event that happens on an annual basis, but those of us who attend every year will have noted that in the last 10 years the level of enthusiasm and engagement was starting to fall away. And I can say to members that since 2023, that has rejuvenated itself. It's an exciting place to be, looking at the innovation, the technology that's coming into the industry. And that's borne out because of things like the agricultural loan scheme. Deputy Tadier is absolutely right. Our competitors elsewhere in the UK and the EU particularly get huge levels of grants when it comes to agriculture and fisheries. There is the grant scheme, the Rural Support and Marine Support Scheme, which is available now, but along with the loans, it's a package which farmers and fishers can look at with confidence for the future. Before I sit down, sir, I'd just refer members to P54, which comes later in this sitting, where the same minister's coming forward to try to hardwire those monies into the government exchequer every year, so that farmers can continue to have confidence knowing that the cash will be there for the loans and for the grants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I thank Deputy Tuddy and Deputy Luce for their speeches and for the support of the Assembly with agriculture and fishing. Sir, I think it's something that we can be proud of, sir, that we are supporting, and we have turned the tide, certainly with regard to agriculture. And we do, of course, need to do so with fishing, sir. But I think we also need to acknowledge that something such as a loan scheme is not somewhere that government nowadays ordinarily likes to find itself, kind of administering a loan scheme. And it's with that in mind, sir, that I would like to thank Jersey Business for the work that they do in actually administering this scheme. The members of the Loans Board, who are volunteers, who oversee that as well, sir. And more than anybody, and I hope the Assembly will forgive me, and I hope the person I'm about to mention will forgive me for using an islander's name in the Assembly, and I must admit I didn't ask permission in advance, sir, but I'm going to go ahead anyway, because I would like to thank personally Mr. John Vautier for the work that he has done. And I thank members for thanking him in the usual fashion, sir, because he has been absolutely at the centre of all these changes and at the centre of turning the tide for these industries, sir. And I am incredibly grateful to him for his work, and I think all the agriculture and fishery sector are as well, sir. So I just wanted to get his name on record as a Jerseyman, that he know his name is now in Hansard, and that the Assembly is grateful for him, and his beard continues to grow. That's great. But with that, sir, thank you. I would like to propose the third reading. Thank you, sir, and call for the appel.
You call for the appel. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. Deputy Miles, your light is on. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the law has been adopted in third reading unanimously, 44 votes for, no votes contra, and no abstentions.
Thank members.
So we move on to the next item of public business, which is the draft criminal procedures Jersey Amendment Law, which is P38, which has been lodged by the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs. The main respondent is the chair of the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Criminal Justice Procedures Jersey Amendment Law 2000, a law to amend procedures under the Criminal Procedure Jersey Law 2018, the Criminal Procedure Bail Jersey Law 2017, and the Police Procedures and Criminal Evidence Jersey Law 2003, and to amend the Royal Court Jersey Law 1948 for connected purposes. The States, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Today I bring forward the draft Criminal Justice Procedures Jersey Amendment Law, which builds on the Criminal Procedure Law that the Assembly approved in 2018. Over the past 8 years, the law has helped to create a more modern, efficient and fair criminal justice system. It has supported better case management and clearer court processes. But as with any large piece of legislation, experience has shown us where improvements can be made. Some issues have only become visible as the law has been used day to day. Some practices have evolved over time, and the ongoing development of new legislation has influenced how parts of the system now operate. The vast majority of 27 articles of this mending law are concerned with administrative improvements in response to these developments. For the most part, these should have no noticeable impact on the experience of people going through the justice system, but are intended to make the processes work more efficiently behind the scenes. Some changes will be noticeable. For instance, Article 14 means that where a person is defending themselves against a charge of child neglect or neglect under the mental health law, they will no longer be able to cross-examine a victim in person, but must use an intermediary. Or if a person is arrested for breach of bail, the new articles mean they can wait a weekend in the prison, not in an unsuitable cell at the police station, as they may be required to do now. Another visible change will be the reduction in the minimum number of jurats required to form the superior number from 5 to 3. For members who may not know, sir, the superior number is the senior form of the Royal Court that decides on sentences when more than 4 years' imprisonment is being considered. If a defendant is convicted by a jury or by the inferior number and the court seeks a sentence of over 4 years, the case must go to the superior number for the sentencing. It does not directly act as a trial court. It is currently made up of the bailiff plus 5 jurats, set by the Royal Court Law 1948. During the pandemic, the quorum was temporarily reduced to the bailiff plus 3 jurats. That system worked well for over 2 years. After discussions with the judiciary, it is now proposed that the quorum should move permanently to 3 jurats. This will help scheduling and ensure sentencing hearings are not delayed without harming the quality of justice. It will always be open to the judge in any case to include more jurats in a particular sentencing decision if they wish. For appeals, the quorum remains at 5, as those appeals may arise from cases considered by the inferior number with a quorum of 2 jurats, and it is felt best to maintain a significant distinction between those two forms of the Royal Court in that respect. It would also clarify the wording used in a summons. This ensures that if a person has previously been arrested, it does not prevent them from being charged by way of a summons. It also makes clear that the summons itself is the charging document. In addition, it also removes ambiguity about whether the magistrate may issue case management directions when sending a case to the Royal Court. This is a simple but important fix that could avoid unnecessary delays. The amending law extends the time allowed for correcting minor mistakes in court judgments. Currently, the Magistrates' Court has only 28 days to fix small errors, and the amendment brings Jersey into line with the UK Crown Court by increasing that period to 56 days. This avoids appeals being launched simply because a minor mistake could not be corrected in time. It future-proofs the preparation for jury lists so that the Viscount's Department can use existing data sources rather than being restricted to a single method of compiling them. This makes the system more resilient and more flexible. It also improves the management of very long trials. At present, if a trial is expected to last more than 5 days, 2 reserve jurors are selected. These reserves follow the trial and can step in if needed. For trials expected to last more than 30 days, which is rare but not unheard of, this law will allow 4 reserve jurors instead of 2. This protects the integrity of very long cases and helps prevent the collapse of a trial due to illness or other unavoidable absences. Another area relates to defence case statements. These are important documents which help the court and prosecution understand the defence being put forward. Members will be aware that I've brought an amendment to the proposition after discussion with the practitioners and the judiciary. That removes the proposed change to allow courts more flexibility to waiver the need for such statements, because there are concerns that this might lead to some time-consuming and fruitless discussions which would outweigh the benefits of flexibility. The remaining effect is to clarify who may be ordered to pay costs if a defendant fails to provide the required statement, either the defendant or their lawyer, depending on the circumstances. The amending law makes a further small but sensible change to the requirement for attendance at sentencing. It is generally right that a defendant should hear the judge's remarks, but for some minor cases in the magistrates' court, such as certain traffic offences requiring attendance, can come at a disproportionate cost in court time. This amendment removes that obligation for the magistrates' court, although the court can decide that a person's attendance is necessary if it wishes. So the majority of the change this amending law will introduce will be invisible to the public or improve their experience, while making the process of justice work more effectively. But there is one proposed change that I know has raised some concern. This amending law will reintroduce the possibility of retrying a case that ends without a verdict being given because the jury is hung, meaning that they have been unable to reach a conclusion. An earlier, less detailed and more open-ended version of these retrial provisions was included in the original criminal procedure law, but was removed by an amendment from the then Education and Home Affairs panel. These new provisions in Article 10 and 11 of the amending law are the product of extensive work with the Law Officers Department and the Judiciary to develop a robust and fair process which will allow a case to be retried on one occasion if the jury in the initial trial are unable to decide if the accused person is guilty or not guilty. I'm sure that the amendment in 2018 was well intentioned, and the Assembly of the day debated the matter in a good faith and concluded that retrials were not wanted. I understand why that decision was taken, but I don't believe that it was right. The debate in 2018 was concerned with hung jury retrials as a theoretical future possibility. There had been no experience of how things would look with the new system of criminal procedure that was being considered. We now have years of experience. We have seen hung juries happen in practice, and I can say with certainty that the lack of any ability to retry the rare cases that end in a hung jury is not in the interests of justice. The main point is that, unlike Jersey Human Rights Group has suggested in its public statements, a hung jury is not the same as a not guilty verdict, and it is not right to lump them together. A jury has the right to decide if a person is guilty of a crime beyond all reasonable doubt or not guilty. Those are the two verdicts that can be returned. If a jury can't decide after being given all the necessary directions after a reasonable period of time, with all their questions answered by the judge, whether or not a person committed a crime beyond any reasonable doubt, then that is not a not guilty verdict. The jury could say not guilty if a majority believed that, but in the case of a hung jury, they have not said that. There is no verdict. The jury cannot decide on one. The actual outcome is that we don't know if a person is guilty or not, and with the law in its current form, we can never try and find out. Not only is that a terrible position for the victim with anyone else who was hoping to see justice done, but in my opinion, sir, it leaves the accused under a cloud forever, as they were put on trial for a crime, and it's never going to be clear whether they did it or not. Other jurisdictions do not have this difficulty. The UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and Ireland don't feel that a don't know outcome of a criminal trial is acceptable. So they have human rights compliant retrial provisions in their laws to let the justice system answer the question. Jersey already provides the Court of Appeal can order retrials where it overturns a conviction, and that has operated effectively for many years. And to be clear, sir, a retrial provision is compliant with human rights because it is not double jeopardy. I will repeat, a hung jury is not an acquittal, it is an undecided case. To resolve the current gap in the law, this amending law would introduce the ability to hold one single retrial following a hung jury. If no retrial is sought, or if the second retrial also ends without a verdict, the accused will be held to be acquitted and the question of guilt will be fully decided in law. Sir, I accept that not all members will support this change, but I believe that it is in the interest of justice to close this loophole in the law before more hung juries occur. Thank you, sir, and I maintain the proposition.
Thank you very much. Are the principles seconded?
So I'm just wondering if it might be helpful to ask for the adjournment now, and then we could have a clean run at the debate after lunch.
Well, are you proposing formally to adjourn?
Yeah, that was my indirect speech request, sir. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Seconded? Members content to adjourn? Yes. Very well. The debate stand adjourned until 2 o'clock.